We're going to start for today. Welcome to the meeting of the California Board of Psychology. Who will be taking quorum? Yeah, Curtis is doing it. Who wants to take quorum? Oh, I have to turn mine off.
Akoibadu? Here. Bernal? Kasuga? Here. Erickson? Here. Fu? Here. Horn? Here. Jones? Phillips? Here. The quorum is established.
Okay. Well, as I said, welcome to the California Board. Okay. Welcome to the California Board of Psychology meeting. Just to remind you of our mission statement. Let me find it here in the paperwork. Isn't it at the end? Okay. Okay. The Board of Psychology advances quality psychological services for Californians by ensuring ethical and legal practice and supporting the evolution of the profession. I don't remember all of our values, but I know that transparency and clarity are two of them, I believe, and accountability or responsibility. So we've got a very action-packed agenda today, so we're going to try to keep everything to a minimum. How many people would like to make public comment? One person. Okay. So just before you make your public comment, I want to remind the board that public comment are for items not on the agenda. The board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this comment section, except whether to decide to add it to a later agenda.
Thank you. Good morning, esteemed board members. My name is Mark Trustin.
Do you want to come forward and use the microphone?
I'll be happy to.
I turned mine off already. Oh,
There.
Good morning, esteemed board members. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Mark Treston. I'm a member of the advisory board at Ryokan College. Ryokan College has been around for several decades. It's a nonprofit, very family-oriented in terms of, we're a small college, we know each other. We have recently engaged in national accreditation search, at which time we, for reasons that I believe some of you are familiar, we have switched to regional accreditation. That would be, of course, WASC. I have worked in compliance for a decade and a half, and of course I'm familiar with the process, as many members are, and we would like to just let you know and announce here that we would prefer to allocate our resources towards the accreditation process and nothing more. I thank you for your time, and again, appreciate your time. Thank you.
thank you very much. Any further public comment? Okay. Hearing none, we will keep marching through this. The next item on the agenda is the Executive Officer's Report.
Good morning, board members.
Mine was still on when you pushed.
Okay. Good morning, board members. Included in your meeting packet is the Executive Officer Report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the report.
Turn your microphone off. It appears there are no questions. Thank you, Ms. Zorek. This microphone situation is going to drive me nuts. Okay. And finally, we have the DCA Executive Update.
Okay. This morning, all of you received a handout, which is the DCA Executive Update. It includes information about recent meetings that the Department of Consumer Affairs has conducted and new appointees Does the board have any questions or comments about the DCA executive update?
Okay, well, we got through that very quickly. We're going to now take a break until 9:30, to allow the parties to the hearings, the first hearing, to get set up. Thank you very much.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Before we start, we want to make sure everybody's cell phones are turned off. And from what I understand, only one microphone works at a time. So, do I have to turn this off before somebody else can speak? Okay, so let's try and remember to do that. I'm sure we all will mess up, but if somebody's not hearing somebody, please raise their hand or something. Okay, Counselor, before we start, do you have a card? I do. Yes, please. Okay, is the court reporter ready? Okay, then we're going to get started with the first matter. We are here in the matter of the petition for reinstatement filed by Simone Ravis. Is that how you pronounce your name? Dr. Simone Ravis. It's the OAH case number is 2018-030872. The case number is 600-2017-000641. Today's date is May 10th, 2018. My name is Cindy Foreman, and I'm the Administrative Law Judge from the Office of Administrative Hearings assigned to sit with the California Board of Psychology, which is convened here today to consider this petition. We are at the Westin Hotel in Los Angeles. May I take the appearances for the record, beginning with the Attorney General's office? Oh, there you have it.
Good morning, Your Honor. Deputy Attorney General Brian Bill on behalf of the people.
Good morning, Your Honor. Adam Brown with the firm of Brown & Brown representing respondent Simone Ravitz. And seated to my right is the respondent, Simone Ravitz. I'm not sure what to hit here.
No, apparently the system doesn't go any other way.
Okay, so we're going to have a lot of transfer moments. Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. We're first going to start with opening statements. Mr. Bill, do you have an opening statement this morning?
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the board. On November 11th, 2008, the petitioner, Dr. Ravitz, voluntarily surrendered her psychologist license after the filing of an accusation that alleged that she was impaired to practice, that she was convicted of a crime substantially related to the practice of psychology, and that she misused dangerous drugs. The underlying facts stem from multiple DUI arrests, as well as a DUI driving under the influence conviction, as well as a history of prescription drug abuse. After surrendering her license, the petitioner was arrested 2 more times for driving under the influence, on April 21st, 2009, and then again on April 25th, 2009. And she entered pleas of guilty to both of those DUI arrests on July 10th, 2009. In 2012, the petitioner filed her first petition for reinstatement, which was denied on May 1st, 2013. Since the denial, petitioner has received 7 separate moving violations for speeding and failing to stop at stop signs. I anticipate that you'll hear from Dr. Ravitz in this case. I believe you'll hear that she has attempted rehabilitation, but ultimately I believe she'll be unable to meet her burden in this case. And at the end of the hearing, I'll ask that you deny her petition for reinstatement. Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll get this system down if it kills me. Good morning, Your Honor, and members of the board. We appreciate being here. Certainly my client seated to my right does. Dr. Ravitz has probably done more than any of my other clients to demonstrate a commitment to sobriety and long-term permanent sobriety. She has just celebrated on April 26th of this year 9 years of sobriety without relapse. And I believe the #1 indicator, probably everyone in the room would agree, regarding future continued sobriety is the past and how well she's done maintaining her sobriety, and she has. She went through a very difficult time in her life. I believe the evidence today will bear that out. However, she has attended AA meetings regularly. She has an abundant, overwhelming amount of evidentiary support in the petition, which we have submitted, and she is absolutely ready to, if testing is required randomly, she's completely agreeable to that. There is nothing to hide with Dr. Ravitz. She's proud of her sobriety. She's dedicated to it, and I believe she absolutely deserves a second chance to practice, and that's really where her passion is. So with that being said, we ask that the board absolutely consider reinstating Dr. Ravitz's license. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bill? Oh, sorry, that's me.
Okay. Yes, Your Honor, can we proceed with the documents? And Your Honor, I believe that there's a stipulation with petitioner to admit the documents contained in the trial binder.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay, well, with that stipulation, I'm going to mark the copy that has been given to me, the redacted copy, as Exhibit 1. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe that the court will mark the redacted copy that was provided to the court. And just for the record, a copy of the original documentation, the unredacted original documents, has also been provided to the court for its review when drafting the decision. And Your Honor, with respect to the stipulation or the admission of the documents into evidence, I believe that Exhibit 4 should be admitted as under Lake v. Reed, and Exhibit 6 and 7 should be admitted as direct evidence, as they are certified copies of court documents and board documents. And the remainder, I believe, would be admitted as administrative hearsay or jurisdictional documents.
Is the stipulation contained in the binder here?
It is not, Your Honor, but I believe that is, I believe Mr. Brown would stipulate to that. I believe that the documents would be admitted as such anyway, even over stipulation.
That's correct, Your Honor. We're not objecting to their admission, so with that being said, I would hope an oral stipulation is sufficient, but that's all I can offer at this point.
That's fine. Okay, so the redacted copy of the petition for reinstatement of surrendered license for Dr. Ravitz will be marked as Exhibit 1, subject to the stipulation that Exhibit 4 will be admitted. Exhibit 4 in the petition will be admitted subject to Lake v. Reed, and Exhibit 6 and 7 will be admitted as direct evidence. The remainder of the documents within the petition will be admitted as either jurisdictional documents and subject to administrative hearsay. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, Your Honor.
Okay, so Exhibit 1's been admitted. Okay, Mr. Bill, are you done at this point with your case? Oh,
Yes, Your Honor, I'll rest subject to my right to cross-examine Dr. Ravitz.
okay, thank you. Mr. Brown? But before you start, Mr. Brown, do you have any additional exhibits besides Exhibit 1? Okay, and do you have any additional witnesses?
No, Your Honor, just respondent.
Okay, then you may proceed.
Bear with me here. Your Honor, I don't know what more I can add. This is kind of a short and sweet petition for reinstatement. I think that I would like to reemphasize to the board and to Your Honor that my client is really here. She's an open book. It's a happy day for her. This is a hopeful day for her. She is, as I said, celebrating 9 years last month of sobriety. Completely remorseful, understands the gravity of the offenses, does not deny them, does not minimize them. She's owned up to what's happened, and the passage of time in this case, I think, is everything. You know, we have clients in my firm quite often who are in a great deal of denial, and that to me is a concern, and I don't take this client's attitude lightly. I'm hopeful that if there is examination of my client today, that will become evident. Her attitude is one of remorse, but of hopefulness that she can prove to the board that she's willing to comply with any reasonable terms of probation. And I think with that being said, you know, I'll allow her to speak if the board wishes, but the packet, we believe, speaks for itself. The supportive documentation speaks for itself, and hopefully my client's attitude and demeanor today will speak for itself as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. How is the board would like to proceed? Would you like Mr. Bill to ask questions, or is the board prepared to ask?
Typically, we start with the attorney's question.
Okay, so Mr. Bill, do you have any questions?
Yes, Your Honor. Should this proceed as we have been doing with the microphones, where one party speaks, turns off the microphone, and then the other party answers?
Yes. Can we just go off the record for a second? I'm just going to turn this off. Dr. Ravitz, before you testify, you need to be sworn in, so can you please stand up and I'll swear you in? Okay, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
Yes.
Okay, now,
Okay. Yes, I do.
okay, thank you. You can sit down and begin your testimony.
Good morning, Dr. Ravitz.
Good morning.
Dr. Ravitz, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. If you don't understand the question, please just let me know.
Okay.
If you don't know the answer to the question, it's quite all right for you to say that you don't know, okay? Yeah, and you have to answer all.
Oh, yes, I do. Yes, I will. Okay.
Dr. Ravitz, since you initially voluntarily surrendered your psychologist license, you have had 3 additional DUIs, is that right?
I had 2 additional DUIs.
Okay. How many total DUIs have you had in the last 10 years?
I had a total of 4 DUIs.
4 DUIs, okay. And the last conviction was in July of 2009?
4/25/09.
That was the arrest date, right?
Right.
The conviction date was in July of
Okay.
2009, is that right?
I don't know.
Fair enough. And I believe you stated in your packet that your sobriety date was 4/25/09, is that right?
4/26/09.
4/26/09. And was that date as a result of the last arrest for driving under the influence?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
It's the date I began to attend AA regularly.
Okay. And since 4/26/09, you've attended AA how frequently?
The first 3 years I attended twice a day, and I now attend several times a week. I've been very active in the attendance and in sponsoring others and having my own sponsors as well.
Okay. And have you completed all 10 steps?
12
steps.
steps.
I'm sorry, 12 steps.
12 steps,
Okay.
yes, I have.
In addition to participating in AA, have you done any other type of treatment to address your drug and alcohol issues?
I'm seeing a psychologist regularly, and she has a specialization in addictions.
And when did you start seeing the psychologist?
I've been seeing her for approximately, I believe, 6 months.
So you started mid-2017? Late 2017?
Yeah, yes, I would say so.
Late 2017? Okay. And how often do you see the psychologist?
I see her once every 5 weeks or so, about that, once every 5 weeks, 4 to 5 weeks.
How many times total have you seen the psychologist?
That I can't tell you.
Okay. When you submitted your packet, you provided evidence of your treatment with the psychologist, is that right?
In the packet I had indicated, the initial packet, which is now a year ago, approximately, I had been attempting to find a psychologist, and I was having a very difficult time under my insurance. I'd contacted a number of psychologists. None of them could take me on, and I finally was able to locate her.
Okay. I want to read a few dates to you that was submitted by the psychologist regarding her dates of service.
Okay.
According to the psychologist, you saw her on 6/21/17. Is that right? Does that sound about right?
Excuse me, Counselor, are you referring to a specific page in the exhibit?
It's AGO 0399.
Thank you.
Ms. Ravitz.
Yes.
Sorry, Dr. Ravitz, perhaps you can look at counsel's copy. That might be an easier way of doing this.
Yes.
And it's
Okay.
in box number 2.
Yes, I see that.
Does this appear to be accurate to the best of your recollection?
Yes.
Okay. So you saw her about 6 times between June 2017 and January 2018. Is that right?
In January,
2018.
yes.
Okay.
And I've been continuing to see her.
Every 5 weeks after that?
Yes.
Okay. How long were you using, actually, let me take a step back. What were your drugs of choice when you were using?
Alcohol.
Okay. Anything else?
And I was using Xanax and Vicodin. And I can't recall what else. I think clonazepam, perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And how often would you drink when you were using?
At the end of my drinking career, I was drinking daily at night.
And then how often at the end of your, before the beginning of your sobriety, how often were you using the prescription medication?
I would use them, it's difficult to recollect.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Did you use Xanax every day before your date
No,
of sobriety?
it wasn't daily. It
What-
was not a daily thing.
What about Vicodin? Did you use that every day?
They were not daily things. And I can't say it was every other day. It was sporadically.
Okay. When you would use these drugs sporadically, would you take more than what was prescribed to you?
I would take more than what was prescribed.
Okay. Was it with the specific intention of becoming high?
I have severe chronic pain,
Okay.
and so for the Vicodin, it was to alleviate the chronic pain.
Okay. What about the Xanax?
And the Xanax was for anxiety, and so it was to alleviate the anxiety.
And the Klonopin?
Same thing.
Anxiety. Did you ever intentionally take all 3 of those drugs together?
I believe in one of the police reports, it indicates that I had taken 2 of them together.
Okay. When was, have you drank alcohol since April 26, 2009?
No, I have not.
Have you taken prescription pain medication since?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And how often do you take prescription pain medication?
I take it very infrequently at this point. I checked with the Kaiser Pharmacy records, and the prescription is to be filled each month, and I don't fill it for 3 to 4 to 5 months at a time.
And you provided those documents to the board, is that right?
No, I have them written. I have the dates written down here.
Okay. And what about the Xanax?
And the same thing is with the Xanax. The frequency of refill is every 5 or 6 months rather than 1 month. I have 5 months here. I have a 6-month gap. I last refilled it February of 2018, and there's more than half the bottle left. I use these things infrequently because I no longer really require them as I used to. I've learned other techniques that I use to reduce pain and to really reduce the amount of anxiety I experience. I'm much more able to tolerate any kinds of distress. I use techniques, mindfulness, meditation, visualization, relaxation, a whole slew of techniques now that I did not have available before.
What type of practice did you have when you were licensed?
I worked with clients on a variety of different issues, whether it was depression or anxiety, stress, a range of conditions.
Did you ever treat patients with addiction issues?
I'm trying to recall. I can't recall.
Okay. The mindfulness techniques,
Right.
Those techniques are standard techniques when dealing with a patient who has anxiety and depression. Is that correct?
It can be used to treat anxiety and depression very effectively.
You said that you get your medications filled at the Kaiser pharmacy, is that
Right.
right? And did you get your medications prior to your sobriety date at the same pharmacy?
Kaiser Pharmacy as well as some other pharmacies,
Okay. And,
local pharmacies.
okay, before you were using, I'm sorry, before your date of sobriety, did you have the same doctors as you have today? Well, let me rephrase that. Do you have the same general physician?
I understand what you're saying. I believe it was the same physician.
Okay. And then in 2012, when you filed your,
However,
oh, I'm sorry.
let me, excuse me. Okay, yeah,
In 2012, when you filed your initial petition,
right,
did you have the same doctors as you have today?
yes,
Okay, the same general practitioner
yes,
and the same, I believe you're saying psychiatrist?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it fair to say that your treatment hasn't changed since 2012? Let me rephrase that. Your treatment regarding the medication that is prescribed to you.
the medications have changed. I am no longer prescribed Xanax. I am prescribed hydrocodone and, and clonazepam. The prescriptions are for lesser amounts, and I refill them much less frequently than is even prescribed for me.
You said you no longer are prescribed Xanax?
Right.
Maybe I misunderstood, but I believe previously you stated that you refilled Xanax in February 2018, or did I misunderstand that?
I think you meant clonazepam?
Okay. When was the last time you filled Xanax?
Oh, I have no idea. It's been a long time. I can't recall.
Okay. In your narrative to the board, you indicate, you list a series of medications
Right.
that you're currently taking. One of the medications, I believe, is a benzodiazepine, the Klonopin.
Right.
Do you, you indicate that you don't use this daily
No, I don't.
and you don't see clients or drive until the effects have worn off. Is that right?
That's correct. In fact, I actually just take it for sleeping. My doctor told me just to take it right before I go to sleep because I'm having sleep problems. So,
Okay.
and I don't even take that every night.
Okay. Oh, counsel, that was on page AGO 014. Dr. Ravitz, I just want to talk about the separate DUIs that you've had over
Yes.
the past few years. Sorry, the past 11 years. The
The
first,
ones I had 9 years ago?
yes.
Okay.
Well, specifically the one from 2005, which was 11 years ago.
Right.
So the first one, I'm sorry, 13 years ago. That case, I believe you were speeding, is that right? Do you remember
I
speeding?
do not have recollections of those individual cases. I spent a lot of time looking over them and going through, replaying them in my mind, and they were very painful. And I have chosen not to dwell.
Okay. Well,
I still have a lot of regret for what I've done.
fair enough. For the board's sake, can we talk about the facts that as I understand them? My understanding is that the first DUI, you were speeding and swerving and hit some type of object that struck a pedestrian. Is that correct?
Yes, it was they were doing construction on the road. There was very little room to drive the car through. And I struck a dumpster that was placed practically in the middle of the road. Behind there, unseen, was the gentleman drinking beer, and the dumpster, when I hit the dumpster, apparently it hit him.
Okay. The second DUI, the date of incident was 11/11/2005. That case, officers noticed that you were splitting lanes, meaning you were driving over the yellow line between two lanes, and that your car had damage consistent with an earlier report of a vehicle striking a guardrail. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, you had your minor child in the car?
Yes, I did.
Okay. The third DUI on 4/24/2009, and the fourth DUI, do you recall the facts of those cases?
Not offhand.
Okay. Do you recall if you were speeding or swerving?
In the third and fourth DUI?
Yes.
I don't recall.
Okay. In your petition to the board, you indicate that your drinking and drug use led to your reckless behavior. Do you recall stating that? And I believe that's on AGO 018.
Just a moment, Counsel.
Sure, through AGO 019.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay. And that you exercised poor judgment during that period of time. I believe you referring to 2005 through 2009.
While I was actively drinking, I exhibited very poor judgment.
Okay. And you've developed a new lifestyle to ensure that you won't repeat the same reckless behaviors. Is that right?
Absolutely.
And what specifically have you changed in order to ensure that you won't repeat the same reckless behavior?
As has been discussed, I have become very involved with the AA meetings. I have developed a very strong social support network there. If I start to feel discomfort, emotional distress, rather than drinking or using medication, I will call somebody from the group. I will seek out support, whether it's from them or from other sober friends. I have a very wide circle of sober friends. I did not previously ask for help at all. I looked on it as a weakness, and I now see it as a strength. And I ask for help whenever I need it. and I'm able to get it from the people with whom I've developed relationships. I also have followed a practice of mindfulness meditation, which helps me learn a great deal. I am able to regulate my emotions and tolerate distress, unlike before. I have vastly changed the way that I think. I have developed self-compassion and self-acceptance, which I did not have before. I was very self-critical, and I had a lot of negative self-talk, which I used to try to suppress with drugs and alcohol. And as Mr. Brown mentioned, I'm really an open book now, and I love it. It's a much better way of living. I live a life of freedom now, and it's wonderful, and I would never go back.
How long did you abuse alcohol? How many years?
I would say that the bad years were probably when I moved down to the desert, so it was about 14 years that it started getting worse and worse.
So the worst part of your alcohol abuse lasted about 14 years?
No, I've been in the desert for 14 years. Okay. So it would have been 5 years.
Okay. So for about 5 years.
Yes.
And then what about, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, it was pursuant to a divorce and a relocation and difficulty with my son and an ex-husband and financial problems and a whole bunch of stressors. So that didn't make things easy.
And then what about your prescription drug use? How long did that last? The prescription drug abuse?
I would say that it was approximately at the same time.
So about 5 years?
Yeah.
Okay. In your petition, you indicate that you were asked how would you handle the situation now, and I believe you indicated that if the same incidents were to happen, you would immediately check yourself into rehab. Is that correct?
Yeah. If I were to relapse, I would absolutely check myself in. That would be essential for me.
What would be, how could you self-regulate that? What would be the cutoff? Would it be 1 drink of alcohol and you check yourself in?
It would be 1 drink of alcohol.
What about the prescription drugs?
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
It's okay.
Yeah.
What about the prescription drugs? How would you self-regulate that?
I think if I started, well, I have never tried to refill a prescription early, but I think that if I got to that point where I needed to refill a prescription before the time that was allotted, that would indicate to me that I had a problem.
What if the physical pain starts getting worse and you have to start taking additional pain medications? How would you handle that situation?
I don't think that the pain is going to get worse because I have different modalities now that I use to deal with it, which I didn't have before. I have a TENS unit, which is a transcutaneous electrical magnetic stimulation. It just gives you electrical stimulation. I use that too. And I have ways of coping now and reducing the pain that I did not have before without the medication.
And I certainly hope that that's the case.
Yeah.
But for the purpose of this hearing, can you just entertain my question?
Sure.
Have you thought through how you would handle if the pain gets worse or if the medications, your pain no longer responds to the medications that you're prescribed,
Right.
or life stressors increase, how would you handle that? What would be the cutoff? Is it, how would you address that situation in terms of deciding that you need inpatient or outpatient rehab?
Not really.
I can re-ask it.
Okay.
You said that if you had one sip of alcohol, you'd check yourself into rehab. Is
Right.
that right?
Yes.
So my question is, with respect to the medications that you're using
Right.
infrequently now,
Yes.
at what point, if that use starts to increase, at what point would you say, I need help and I need rehab?
Okay, as I mentioned, if I felt like I needed to refill prescriptions before they were due, that to me would be an indication that I had a problem, and I would seek help for that.
Okay. And would you agree that a person who falls back into drug and or alcohol abuse, that they're not in the best state of mind to be able to self-regulate in that manner?
If they're in their full-blown addiction, judgment is very poor.
Because the person who is in their,
However, there are signs in advance, typically, before relapse even happens. There are signs that is probably forthcoming, and if you're aware of them, you can take measures to avoid it.
what are those signs for you?
If I become, I don't know because I haven't relapsed, but I know that when I start upping my meetings, it's because I'm feeling irritable, I'm thinking negatively, I'm feeling impacted by stressors more than previously. So then I take the precautions because I know the alternative is that if I don't take the precautions, there's a possibility that I would relapse. So I choose not to go down that route. So I increase my meetings. I get more support from others. I do my meditation exercises more often. I take the precautions. I take the alternative route, and it's an active choice.
What are your triggers for use?
Triggers for use, I would say, are, it's been a long time since I've even felt like using anything. I think stress is always a trigger for anybody with addiction, and if stress becomes out of control. But again, I have means of managing that stress now. It's hard for me to say as I haven't relapsed, so it's hard to say. But I am aware of if I feel a lot of emotional discomfort or stress, that I will take alternative action to prevent relapse.
Okay. During the initial filing of the accusation in 2009, I believe it was, you had what's called an 820 examination. Do you recall doing that?
Is that a psychological evaluation?
Yes.
Yes, I do.
And do you recall that the examiner opined that you should seek psychological treatment for addiction issues? Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. And then when you reapplied for licensure in 2012, I believe that there was another evaluation. Is that correct?
I think I only had one.
Okay.
So I'm not sure of the date of when it was done.
Did you read the board's decision denying your petition in 2013? Do you recall reading that?
I don't recall what I read, but I did read it.
Okay. I'm curious as to why it took so long for you to obtain psychological treatment for your addiction issues when it was known to you early on in your licensing case that was something that should be done. So why did it take so
I
long?
was getting treatment
Okay, through who?
through AA.
Okay. Is AA psychological treatment?
No, it's not psychological treatment. It's addiction treatment.
How is AA addiction treatment?
It's a manner of completely changing your thoughts, your behavior, your way of being to really eliminate the need for relying on substances. It's about being truthful and honest with yourself, getting out of your head, listening to others tell stories about their addictions, which scares the crap out of you, and giving you the option to help other people. So you get, again, out of your head. AA is highly effective, and it's worked for me.
Do you believe that AA, in your case, was used in lieu of psychological addiction treatment?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
However, I did seek out psychological treatment as an adjunct.
Do you believe that it's unethical for a psychologist to not address personal issues that could impact professional functioning?
Can you rephrase that?
I'm object on vagueness grounds. I don't understand that question, Your Honor.
Sure. Do you believe a psychologist has an obligation to clients to ensure that their own issues don't impact the treatment of the client?
Yes.
Okay. And do you believe that by attending AA treatment that sufficiently addressed your addiction issues?
Attending AA has a huge part in addressing my addiction issues. It's not the only thing I've been doing. As I mentioned, I'm also very involved with mindfulness and meditation, which allow me to address many of my issues. I also do a lot of self-work with my thoughts, my cognitions, how it impacts my emotions. My attitude is completely different. I'm able to be, there's no secretiveness anymore. I'm open, I'm an open book. There's nothing else, I don't think that there's anything that would negatively impact a client. And what I've been doing is coaching clients, which is a little bit different from therapy. But should I be doing therapy, and hopefully I will be, I don't foresee that as a problem. If anything arises, I would immediately take care of it. I am very interested in ethical issues and being very highly ethical.
Okay. You mentioned your current position as is essentially a life coach.
Yes, I was working as a business and life coach for 5 years.
And in what capacity or how do you assist clients in your current business?
Well, in my current business, there's two different things. There's business and life coaching, which I did for 5 years.
Okay.
And I'm currently working at a treatment facility
Okay.
doing addiction education and just kind of teaching basic life skills.
So at the treatment facility, that's
Right.
a substance abuse treatment
It's a
facility?
detox.
Detox.
So people come in and they're usually intoxicated, and they spend several days there getting off of their drugs of choice.
Okay. And what is your role at the detox center?
What I do there is to assist them in any way I can while they're detoxing, addressing physical needs, or just helping them with whatever they need at the time to detox. And then if they're able to have some level of orientation and cognitive awareness, I will talk to them about addiction.
And generally, what do you tell the clients or speak to the clients about?
Well, I
addiction?
speak to them about different theories of why people get addicted, and talk to them about addiction as a disease model, and discuss the impact on the brain of substances, things of that nature.
And if you were to get your license back, would you have a therapeutic role at this facility?
It might be possible. I would very much like that to happen. I do like working in the field of recovery, and feel that because of my experiences and the fact that I am an alcoholic and addict, that I can really contribute a lot.
Now, your life coaching, are you still engaging in that business?
Very infrequently.
If you get your license back, will you continue with that business or?
No.
Okay. All right. Now I just want to talk about the moving violations, the traffic tickets that you've had. And I don't want to go through all of them
Okay.
one by one. Do you recall receiving about 7 moving violations between 2013 and 2017?
13 and 17. Okay, so in those 4 years, 7. I knew there were multiple. I didn't know it was 7, but I thought maybe it was 6.
Okay. And it's fair to say they were mostly for speeding, the
Yes.
majority?
Yes, they were,
A few,
for speeding.
and then running a red light or failure to stop at a stop sign? Is that a yes?
Yes.
And I believe during your interview with the board, you said that you had a heavy foot. Is that right?
Well, no, I say that I was overwhelmed at the time. I was working all over the county, going to coachees' homes and driving an incredible amount of time, and also trying to attend many networking meetings and other types of meetings. And I obviously didn't plan it in a good way. Since that time, what I've done, I haven't accrued any others, because I now make it mandatory that I leave 25 minutes before I'm supposed to arrive anywhere. I get there 25 minutes early in advance. I plan my clothes out that I'm going to wear. I route exactly how I'm going to drive. So I haven't had any problems since then.
Okay.
It's a much saner way of driving and living.
Okay. Do you agree that speeding and failing to stop at stop signs can indicate that the driver has poor judgment?
Yes, it indicated that I had poor judgment at the time.
And what about poor reaction time?
I don't think that has anything to do with it.
What about a lack of awareness of the surroundings?
I don't understand.
I'm going to check on Vegas grounds.
Okay.
I understand this.
Do you believe that speeding and failing to stop at stop signs can indicate that the driver lacks awareness of their surroundings? For example, they don't know what the specific speed limit is, and they are not paying attention to the, where stop signs are, things of that nature.
Same objection, Your Honor. Can or cannot. It's too vague to respond to. And relevance.
Okay. Okay. Have you had any subsequent interactions with law enforcement since your last moving violation on September 14th, 2017?
No.
No additional arrests?
Nope.
Okay. And if the board were to grant a license and place conditions upon that license, what would be your feeling about that?
That would be, my feeling would be a feeling of excitement and happiness, and any things that need to be placed on that would be fine with me.
I have nothing else.
Can you hear me? Oh, there. Oh, yeah. I guess. Okay, now we're going to hear words of wisdom. Okay, we can go back on the record. Okay. Mr. Brown, do you have redirect at this point, or would you like to have the, we can speak with the, see if the board has any questions?
Your Honor, just a very few questions. I'll be happy to report here, and then we can proceed.
Yes.
Okay, so Dr. Ravitz, I was struck by a couple things in your testimony today. I believe there was a question that was posed to you about returning to your previous use of substances. Quite a few questions. We seem to kind of be retrying some of that case, the accusation case. You stated, "I would never go back," and that struck me. Can you tell me what you mean by that? Why did you say that?
I would never go back to the behaviors and the lifestyle that I was leading beforehand. Thankfully, it's in the past. It was a horrible period in my life. I have so much regret over that still, and I always will. But I feel very fortunate that I've had the chance to completely develop a whole new lifestyle and change myself so dramatically. I feel very fortunate that has been the case. And I think that speaks for itself.
You also testified, I believe, that you don't have secrets anymore. I believe you said, "I'm an open book." Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Tell us what you meant by that. Why are you an open book, and what does that mean to you?
Well, it means to me because beforehand, I had, with addiction, there's so much secretiveness and hiding behavior. And so I had to be engaged in all of that. And it's such a negative way of being. And aside from that, I also, as I mentioned briefly, I was very self-critical and hard on myself. So I have really learned how to, as I mentioned, I've really been able to develop a lot of self-acceptance and self-compassion. And I have nothing to hide. I'm proud of who I am. And I know that I am very good in working with other people and would love to be able to share that again.
Dr. Ravitz, there's been a great deal of questioning regarding the apparently 7 moving violation traffic tickets.
Right.
You recall that?
Yes.
And were you ever prosecuted at a criminal level for any of those?
No, I was not.
So those were all infractions, correct?
Yes.
You stated also in your testimony, I believe, that you have changed your approach to leaving your home for appointments and destinations by leaving earlier
Yes.
as one of your methods of avoiding future traffic violations. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And again, you live where currently?
I live in Palm Springs.
Okay, and for this morning's meeting, which was scheduled to begin at 9:30 in the morning, when did you leave your home today?
I left at 4:30 a.m.
And did you arrive on time?
Yes, I arrived on time. I arrived early.
My next question was, were you early?
Yes, I was very early.
Okay. And not just the board meeting, which is understandably a very important event, but for any other event that requires your attendance, would your approach be different, say, to meet a client?
I'm always early now. People mark me by my earliness. They know me. I'm always early.
Okay, so no change.
No.
How long have you been able to, when were you last late for an appointment? Let me rephrase that question. Can you recall?
No.
Okay. If the board was to reinstate your license, and one of the terms and conditions of a possible probationary offer would be that you were to randomly test for prohibited substances, do you have any problem whatsoever with
No,
that?
nothing whatsoever.
If I asked, excuse me, I'm sorry. If I asked you today in 20 minutes to provide a test for the board to review for banned substances, would you have any problem doing so?
No.
Okay, I have nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Bill, do you have any further questions, or should we go around through the board?
I just have one question. Dr. Ravitz, do you have a current valid California driver's license?
Yes, I do.
Nothing further.
Okay, then why don't we see if the board has any questions? I'm going to just go from one end to the other and then alternate between petitioners. Ms. Bernal?
There we go. Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Ravitz. I just had a quick question, and you may have answered it, and I may have missed it. You said in 2017 you were seeking therapy. Is that, or you were trying to get an appointment? Is that correct? So were you able to? Yes. Oh, you are. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Erickson?
morning, Dr. Ravix. I have a few questions. I'll try to make them succinct. The period of being heavy-footed, the 7 violations, that was over about a 4-year span of time. And I believe you said that was a time that the heavy-footedness was poor judgment on your part. Is that correct?
Oh, it
Could I
works.
cut?
No.
We're going to be back on the record, and there's a question pending, I believe.
I was asking whether during that 4-year period when you were heavy-footed, I know we're using the term loosely here, was that a time when you had poor judgment on each of those infractions?
I was exhibiting poor judgment about my driving decisions, about when I was leaving, and my organization in terms of trying to make it to multiple locations, you know, and didn't really plan ahead and didn't realize how long it was going to be taking me.
And why do you think it took 7 different times to realize that there was a problem?
Sorry.
Okay. Yes, 7 times is a lot. And the fact is that I did learn from it and change. So I think that that's what I want to focus on and look at.
Good. We're both on.
Oh, they're both
This
on
is-
now.
Now they tell us.
This is wonderful. Let's proceed quickly.
Yeah, well, we can.
I think when I looked through the medication list that you're using, it looked like quite a few medications that could, if used at the same time, or some of them at the same time, could possibly impair judgment, thinking, performance. How does one know, or how do you know whether taking those medications impairs your judgment or performance?
Yeah. I've gone through this with my doctor, and he has given me very specific directions about how to utilize the medications. And as I mentioned, I do not combine, for example, I would not combine an anxiolytic with the pain medication.
Yeah, I'm just indicating I
He
wanted
told me
to
to
look at
look at him.
the questioner. That's all. I'm sorry.
Okay. I don't. I think I answered.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible that during any of those 7 infractions you were under the influence of medication?
I do not think so.
Okay, no further questions.
As I mentioned, those were, I believe, during the day, all of them, so I take the medication in the evening when
Thank
I
you.
take it.
Thank you. Oh,
I have no questions at this time. Dr. Phillips?
There we go. Okay. I just had a few questions for you. You said that you have meetings you go to regularly. Approximately how many meetings do you go to a week?
I go to about 3 meetings a week now.
Okay.
I go more often if I believe that I need it.
And you said you sponsored some people in the program?
Yes.
Are they all women or women and men?
They're women.
Okay. Approximately how many people are you sponsoring right now?
Right now, I'm not sponsoring anybody. I've probably sponsored 12 women.
Over the course of time?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a sponsor?
We have a group sponsorship at the meeting I go to.
What does that mean?
That means that when we work through the steps, there's a group of women that sits and helps us go through the steps, and that group is also available as our sponsor. So I have 3 to 4 women I can call at any time I need, and they are my sponsors.
So they collectively act as your sponsor?
Yes, but I can use any of them individually as
I
well.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned that, or from looking at the records, it looked like at one point you were taking ketamine.
Yes.
What were you taking ketamine for?
That was prescribed to me for fibromyalgia.
Okay. You are no longer taking ketamine?
No, I haven't taken that for a long time.
I believe that one of your infractions involved ketamine. Is that correct?
It may well have,
Okay.
but I have not used that, as I mentioned, for a long, long time.
Okay. You are currently taking medication on an as-needed basis, as I understand.
Yes, as
Okay.
needed.
And do you feel uncomfortable taking medication?
I'd prefer not to take any medication, which is why I've developed these skills and tools, which I use. Medications are a last resort.
Okay. And the reason I ask is because I know that people in sobriety sometimes express
Right.
discomfort about the
Right.
fact that they still have to take medication
Yes.
while they're sober.
Right.
Yeah. That is your experience? That it feels uncomfortable?
I don't like taking any medications. However, I believe that the medications I'm taking allow me to function and be productive. And if I weren't taking them, I don't know what my life would be like.
So it sounds like you're at peace with taking the medications.
Yes.
Okay. The final area I wanted to ask you about was going to the psychologist.
Yes.
When did you start looking for a psychologist?
In 2017.
Was it in anticipation of this hearing?
No, I just felt that that I wanted to have somebody to talk to and to process things with. I've seen therapists before.
During the period of your probation? Or during the period
Of
since
my
you lost your
life.
license?
In my life, during the period of my life, I've seen a number of therapists before.
So prior to finding this new therapist that
Yes.
you've gone to for approximately 6 months,
Right.
had you seen a therapist since you'd lost your license?
Yes, I had. He's no longer in the desert, but I had seen him.
For how long did you see him?
I saw him probably for about a period of 5 or 6 months.
Okay. And why did you see that person?
For issues regarding anxiety primarily, and as well as issues regarding my son.
Okay. And are those similar issues to what you're addressing now in your therapy?
What I'm addressing now is primarily ensuring that I'm doing everything possible to maintain my sobriety, processing anything that comes up so that I don't have a buildup of distress or negative emotions that may act as a trigger. But I really see it as an adjunct. It's just part of my whole program that's so comprehensive and that's working so well for me.
So you consider your primary form of treatment to be AA, and your secondary form of treatment or adjunctive treatment to be your psychotherapy?
I see AA, I see my attendance at the Insight Community of the Desert where I do mindfulness meditation. I see the psychotherapy. I see them as all integral parts of my treatment plan.
Okay. And I guess the reason I'm asking for your motivation in going to
Right.
therapy now
Yeah.
is it appears you're going to therapy because you want to cast yourself in a good light with the board.
Oh,
That's not the case?
that's not the case.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Jones?
I have no questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, Horn?
I don't have any questions right now. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Fu?
Thank you. One of the criteria by which we evaluate rehabilitation is the length of time between the acts. Do you feel like the 9 years has been sufficient time elapsed?
I really do feel that it's been sufficient. I feel the changes that I've gone through have been dramatic and sustained. So I feel I'm really ready for this, and it's something I'm so passionate about doing.
And then just one other question.
Sure.
One of the other criteria is also looking for remorse.
Yeah.
And in your response to the dumpster, you had mentioned that the dumpster was in the way and that the person who was struck was drinking beer.
He was drinking beer behind it, yes.
Does that reflect on your remorsefulness in terms of the dumpster being in the way as the reason why the harm was done versus the driving
I feel
of influence?
terrible about all of those incidents. I think I mentioned that before. I have so much remorse for my behavior. And it's still very painful.
No further questions. Thank you.
Dr. Kasuga?
Hi, Dr. Ravix. I have a follow-up question from the line of questioning of Dr. Phillips with regards to your current psychotherapy. So on a previous report by Dr. Son, it was mentioned that one of her concerns is with regards self and other deception, and I think it might be related to the prescriptions that you've obtained, multiple prescriptions that you've obtained during that time. What have you done to address that? And are you working in your current therapy to address that concern?
I don't really understand the question.
I guess my question is with regards the Dr. Son's concern regarding self and other deception that she mentioned on the report.
Well, that is part and parcel of being an addict, is deceiving, being in denial and deceiving others about using. And with the fact that I am no longer using, the whole deception thing has gone away, as well as the fact that I've really worked hard on it and on being open. When I go to AA meetings, I share completely openly things that, you know, before I would never have dreamed of even being able to talk about. So I think that has really been something that I've worked hard on and that I've been able to, I'm trying to think of the word, to put that to rest.
So it seems like talking about it in AA has helped with that concern that Dr.
Talking about it in AA, talking about it to people that are supporting me, asking for help, talking about it in my therapy. All of those things have been very, very essential.
Mm-hmm. I've reviewed all the paperwork that you've submitted. Is there a current report from your psychotherapist that you have submitted, or there wasn't?
Yeah, she submitted a letter.
I was trying to look for it. Oh, okay. I was trying to look for it.
Cherry Portland.
300. Okay.
It's the one you were looking at before that had the numbers.
0396.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Oh, yeah. Do you foresee yourself continuing to see your current therapist?
Yes, I will be continuing to see her. I get a lot out of it, and I think it's very helpful for me to be able to go in there and share what's going on and to get suggestions and get an alternative perspectives of how to see what's going on in my life. And yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, does any other members of the board have any follow-up questions? Okay, Mr. Bill, do you have any follow-up question? Mr. Brown?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, is there, would you like to make a statement at all to the board?
I would just like to thank everybody here for allowing me to present and talk about my case. I know you all are very busy. I again wanted to communicate that I am very remorseful about my past behavior and that I think I have done a very good job. I've worked very hard at changing every aspect of my behavior, my life, my being, and that I think I can actually put what I've been through to great use in being able to better help people with whom I can hopefully be working as a clinical psychologist.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Ravitz. At this point, unless somebody else has anything to say, the hearing will be closed.
Just like to say that we thank the board on behalf of Petition and myself. Thank you all for your time and consideration of the petition. That's it.
Okay, it is now 10:55. We started at 9:30, and the matter is now closed. Thank you very much, everyone. Everybody has returned. It turns out that I closed the the hearing on the first matter too early, so we are going to reopen the record in the matter of the petition for reinstatement filed by Dr. Ravitz and allow for closing argument by counsel. Okay? So, Mr. Bill?
Thank you, Your Honor. And I'll be brief. Members of the board and Your Honor, in a petition for reinstatement of a license, the burden at all times, the burden of proof rests on the petitioner to prove that she has rehabilitated herself and should have her license restored. In this case, I don't believe that the petitioner has presented sufficient evidence of rehabilitation. Rehabilitation has been defined as a state of mind, and the amount of evidence of rehabilitation that is required varies according to the seriousness of the misconduct. In this case, we have underlying issues of drug and alcohol abuse, addiction issues. And while the petitioner has participated in ancillary services like AA, she has not addressed the underlying psychological issues that caused the addiction issues. And I think that was evident today in her inability to truly identify the triggers that caused her to drink and excessively use drugs. Additionally, she just started seeking therapy. She started in June 2017, and I believe that she saw the therapist about 6 times between June 2017 and January 2018. And according to the therapist's therapy information sheet submitted by the therapist, the issues that were addressed were, quote, issues related to reinstatement of her license and the anxiety she has experienced as she worked to meet the requirements of probation. There's been no evidence that she's addressed her underlying addiction issues. And because of that, I would submit to the board that she hasn't presented sufficient evidence of rehabilitation because she's going to continue to act in a manner that evidences poor judgment, poor impulse control, and that's proven by her 7 speeding and red light tickets that she's received between 2013 and 2017. She's continuing to act with poor judgment, and I would submit to the board that at this point the petitioner has not met her burden and that her petition should be denied. Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll also be brief. Sorry about that. With all due respect, I'm in total disagreement with complainant's argument, or with the board's, Mr. Bill's argument that the burden has not been met in this case. I absolutely believe it has been. I'm a bit confused as to the interpretation of the evidence heard today, indicating that my client is in some way not owning up to her past digressions and is in any way more likely now than before to resume drinking. In fact, 9 years passage of time to me indicates that she's absolutely committed to sobriety. Perhaps it's the best indicator that we can possibly have is continued and successful sobriety. We're looking at 9 years here, moving on 10. There is a point at which everyone deserves a second chance, and I believe that Dr. Ravitz certainly does. She also, I believe the evidence bore out today that she is able to identify the triggers that caused her to drink, and I thought she did a good job of explaining those to the board today as well. The seeking out of therapy is not recent. It's almost a year ago, and she continues her efforts in seeking therapeutic help. I believe, and I strongly believe, that she deserves a second chance to practice. She's willing to help others. She's also accepting of reasonable probationary terms, which will protect the public, including random testing as often as the board may desire. With that being said, I ask that the board consider and grant the petition for reinstatement for Dr. Ravitz, and I thank you for your time again.
Mr. Beal, do you have anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Prum, anything further?
No, thank you.
Okay, well, that now concludes the hearing, and it is now 11:10, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've just got to let the attorney set up.
Yeah, I know, so they can go.
Yeah, but
Okay.
we are.
Okay.
Sometimes they start. Committee. Those are the big picture things I concentrate on. I thought it was like,
It was, but it was like, because LAX apparently has like some traffic at night, so we're all, the plane's ready, but not aware that there's traffic.
usually what happens coming into LAX is you get delayed because they don't have a runway for you here.
Yeah.
That was
Right?
for the not going to lead reception. I took it to the airport. We were trying to figure out.
Oh, no, this morning.
Oh, this morning.
Yeah, that time it was,
You flew in this morning?
it was like, yeah, 30 minutes.
Counselor, do you have a card? Do you have a card? Do you have a card? Yes, please.
Was that the one you went to? The hospital?
I wish that was the one.
Can I use one of these pieces of paper?
Oh, yeah, please.
The one that Kiyomi is now, right? Kiyomi Burger. What was that?
There's like three different like women's conference within the last month.
It was a reception for the gubernatorial appointments that were running.
Oh,
Oh, that's cool.
Hotel. Yeah, so
Were you invited?
Were you a CPA?
you were invited. I was at CPA.
Yeah. Awesome.
That's cool.
No.
That's a great idea.
CPA is.
Okay.
Can you read the scroll?
A. Stephen Frankel, PhD, JG. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, is it Dr. Frankel? Okay, before we go on the record, is everybody ready? We're going to start with our next hearing. Mr. Frankel, do you have any additional exhibits that you've offered?
I'm sorry, I'm hearing impaired.
Do you have any additional exhibits that you've offered in today?
Yes, my client has brought them for the council.
Okay, are there copies for the board?
There will be a copy when we leave. We
Oh.
will not be referring to them.
Your Honor, I just received a copy of the binder just right now. I've looked through it and it appears to be just additional mitigation documents. I could certainly provide it to Your Honor I won't be referring to it
Okay.
during my case.
I guess my question is, do you have copies of those documents for the board as well? Have they seen those documents?
We have a copy for council. If the board would like a copy for the board, we will provide that.
Okay, well, let's see how it goes, and then, because it's going to be hard for the board is going to have its deliberations today, so unless there are, unless the board has the opportunity to have copies, I don't know how we're going to be able to use those documents. Okay. And are there going to be any witnesses? Do you have any additional witnesses besides your client?
No.
Okay. Then let's proceed. Are you ready? Great. Okay. We are here in the matter of the petition for reinstatement by Roberto J. Velasquez, Dr. Roberto J. Velasquez. The OAH case number is 2018-030876. The agency case number is 600-2017-000551. Today's date is May 10th, 2018. The time is 11:15 in the morning. My name is Cindy Foreman, and I'm the Administrative Law Judge from the Office of Administrative Hearings, assigned to sit with the California Board of Psychology, which is convened here today to consider this petition. May I take the appearances for the record, beginning with the Attorney General's office?
Deputy Attorney General Brian Bill on behalf of the people.
Thank you. Steve Frankel, attorney for
Okay, you're going to need to put your, push a button there that has the microphone on.
That one?
Yeah, and then a red light will come on.
Yeah, we're
Okay, so can you just repeat that for the record?
My name is Steve Frankel. I'm the attorney for Dr. Velasquez.
And is Dr. Velasquez here today?
He is here.
Okay. We can proceed. Mr. Bill?
Thank you, Your Honor. On December 23rd, 2013, the petitioner voluntarily surrendered his psychologist license and admitted truth of the allegations set forth in accusation number 1F 2012-222-715. Specifically, petitioner admitted that he was convicted of crimes substantially related to the qualifications, functions, or duties of a psychologist, and that he committed dishonest or corrupt acts. The underlying facts include petitioner creating fraudulent forms on behalf of patients to be submitted to the Social Security Disability Agency, as well as INS for citizenship test certification forms. He was charged federally. He eventually went to federal prison. He entered a plea of guilty to 2 felony counts that alleged that between 2005 and 2011, the petitioner created 644 claims for disability filed fraudulently. It was determined that about 1/3 of the petitioner's entire patient files contained fraudulent documents. The petitioner admitted after his arrest that he received payments of $200 for each falsified document. The petitioner was arrested on April 13th, 2012, and he was released on pretrial supervision on April 16th, 2012. Between that time and his incarceration, he tested positive for cocaine. The petitioner was released from prison and placed on parole, and he was successfully terminated from parole on December 23rd, 2016. He subsequently filed this petition in 2017. At the end of the hearing, I will ask that the board deny the petition. Thank you.
Mr. Frankel, do you have an opening statement?
Opening statement?
Yes.
Yes. Good afternoon, perhaps morning, to the board members, to Your Honor, the council. I represent Dr. Velasquez, who is petitioning the board for reinstatement of a psychologist license. I have known of Dr. Velasquez by reputation in the professional community of Southern California psychologists for many years before the matter before the board arose. He has always been described in most positive terms I've ever heard about a colleague by other colleagues I have known and I've respected. Thus, it was disturbing to learn of the fact of the investigation initiated by the board and to learn of the circumstances of that investigation. I've remained in contact with Dr. Velasquez for the duration of the time since his incarceration. And as I believe my colleagues on the board will agree, I'm pleased to represent him in this petition for his reinstatement. Because of the types of work that I do as both a psychologist and an attorney, I've been aware of circumstances very similar to those that led to the action against Dr. Velasquez and have become increasingly concerned about our colleagues' experiences of mid to later life crises. I'm painfully familiar with cases against colleagues who have had life changes, both psychologic as in dementia and circumstantial as in divorces, custody conflicts, etc. And Dr. Velasquez's matter is one of particular interest to me in that it involves an individual for all the right reasons is so completely open and above board in his disclosures of the circumstances and events in his life that led to his incarceration and loss of license. I'm also highly proud of Dr. Velasquez as he has demonstrated both a willingness to look carefully at the events that contributed to his fall, as well as investing significant commitment to his rehabilitation and re-entry into a post-imprisonment world. He has been open, forthright, hardworking, and exceedingly well received by those who have been working with him in a variety of life activities, from employment to education, to medication, to psychotherapy, to camaraderie. All of these are more than well deserved. I have informed Dr. Velasquez not to be surprised if the board's reaction to this first petition is to deny it. Such a result would be consistent with what I have seen regarding other professionals I've represented in the past. However, I would like to say that if there were any cases that deserved granting initial petition for reinstatement of a psychologist license, this is a clear example of such a case. In sum, I've been truly amazed and pleased as a result of what I have learned about Dr. Velasquez and fully support his position for reinstatement. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Bill?
Your Honor, regarding the documents, I believe that counsel and I will stipulate. Regarding the documents, Your Honor, I believe that counsel and I will stipulate to their admissibility. With respect to the binder labeled binder 4 that I received this morning, I will leave it to Your Honor's discretion if you want to receive this into evidence. It appears to be consistent with the documents provided in binders 1 through 3. In that it appears to be CEU certificates, various presentations done by Dr. Velasquez, as well as other documentation that is consistent with the documents provided initially by Dr. Velasquez.
Petition for reinstatement and revoked license, there were Dr. Copy, and you've also provided the unredacted copy, but I know we're not going to exhibit one, your redacted copy. With the new set of exhibits, with the new set of exhibits,
The board does not have a copy, and so it's going to be difficult for the board to use those exhibits in its evaluation. However, you will have the opportunity to question Dr. Velasquez, and to the extent that there's information contained in those exhibits that you'd like the board to know, then that would be something that you could bring out in your questioning. Okay, so I'm going to exclude those documents from evidence at this point because the board has no way to review them before its deliberations.
I understand, Your Honor.
Okay, but again, if you need to, if there's anything in those exhibits that you would like the board to know, then, you know, please feel free to question your witness on those issues. Okay? Mr. Bill, is there anything else?
No, Your Honor, I'll rest subject to my right to cross-examine Dr. Velasquez.
Okay, Mr. Frankel?
I invite the board to raise questions and concerns.
Okay, well then I guess, Mr. Bill, do you want to start your questioning?
Yes, Your Honor. Actually, can you try hitting the button? We have 2 working microphones. That's wonderful. Good morning, Dr. Velasquez.
Good morning.
Can you move the microphone a little bit closer? Thank you.
Good morning. I do.
Dr. Velasquez, I'm going to be asking you a series of questions this morning about the facts of your case. If you don't understand the question, please let me know. If you need the question restated, I can do that for you. And if you don't know the answer, please don't hesitate to say that you don't know. Okay? Dr. Velasquez, I want to talk about the underlying case, the federal case against you. Is that okay?
That is fine.
Okay. During that case, you're providing therapy at a facility called Pacific Health Systems. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And while you were providing therapy there, you began treating individuals who had been approved for Social Security disability insurance benefits. Is that right?
I worked for Pacific Health Systems for many, many years, and the majority of the clients that came to Pacific Health Systems were low income individuals. The majority were on Medi-Cal. Many that were on Medi-Cal through disability, but not all of the clients were on disability.
Okay, I didn't mean to imply that they were, but you did treat certain patients that received SSDI benefits. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And during the course of your treatment of patients who received SSDI benefits, you were asked by the patients to complete various documents that would either support or not support the patient receiving benefits. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And for some patients, I'm not saying all, but for a certain portion of patients, you agreed to sign, to fraudulently sign documents that would support their receiving benefits. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And prior to signing the documents fraudulently, you would work for the Social Security Administration as a medical reviewer for many years. Is that right?
Well, I worked as an evaluator, like a contract evaluator, for SSI, where clients were sent to me to do evaluations. That was trying to kind of give you a timeline of that, but that was before I worked at Pacific Health Systems.
Okay.
And that was for a number, probably 3 to 4 years, and that wasn't full-time work, but very part-time. But I did do some work for them.
So you had a basic understanding of the system, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. In your petition packet, I believe you stated that around 2011 you saw an increase of patients who were fleeing the war in Iraq. Is that right?
What happened is that around 2011, I worked in a practice with psychiatrists and other psychologists, so it wasn't just me. And at that time, the Pacific Health Systems started to have an increased number of folks who were Middle Eastern, who had settled as refugees in San Diego County, and specifically the eastern part, and they came to Pacific Health Systems. So I began to be more and more exposed to individuals who were from that part of the world, and most were, I would say, from Iraq, and there were some folks from Afghanistan.
Okay, and were these individuals brought to you by an advocate?
There was a woman who started bringing these individuals for medications with the psychiatrists, and oftentimes this, the psychiatrist would refer them to me for therapy. So that's how I got to meet the advocate. And then there were some cases where clients didn't need medication, so but they were referred for therapy to me. But that's generally how I met this advocate. Okay. She advertised herself as a translator at first. I later found out that she was an advocate who actually received money from these folks, these clients, that I didn't know.
Okay. And when this advocate would bring clients in, would she also act as a translator during your therapy sessions?
Some sessions, but not all.
Okay. When this advocate would bring in clients to you, did the clients ask you to complete various documents fraudulently?
No, not always.
Did that happen? Were there patients that asked you to do this?
Patients that asked me to do this?
Were there, okay, let me take a step back. Did people come to you, to your office at Pacific Health Systems, and ask you to complete fraudulent documents?
Are you saying just specifically that action, or did they come to therapy, and sometime during therapy, did they ask me to help fill out SSI documents because they were disabled? Or felt that they were disabled?
Well, how about this? Did certain clients, patients ask you during the course of therapy to complete SSI documents?
Yes.
Did they ask you during the course of therapy to complete them fraudulently?
No.
Okay. Did individuals ever come to your office not seeking therapy, but seeking documents to be completed fraudulently?
There was, looking back, that I recall, one individual who I found out later had a wire on him, who I believe came from SSI, who did ask for that. And there was a recording in the case that was submitted by the federal prosecutor. I never listened to that recording, but my understanding was that someone did come into my office and did request that specifically.
So that was the one time that a person came in to your office and said, can you fill out these, and I'm paraphrasing, can you fill out these documents fraudulently?
No one ever said to me, can you fill out these forms fraudulently?
So how did it work? How did you end up getting into federal trouble?
Well, what happened, from my point of view, what happened was that there was this translator that brought these clients. These clients were unemployed. Many were unemployable because many of the clients not only had psychiatric conditions, but they also had visible medical conditions. I saw clients who claimed that they had been injured or maimed by the war in the Middle East. And so there were clients that described to me what appeared to be PTSD, depression, anxiety. There were clients that displayed a lot of despair in the interviewing them and working with them. The translator did say that would say to me that these folks, she believed that these folks were eligible for SSI, and then at some point during the time I was seeing them in treatment, I either decided to support the SSI application or I decided not to.
And during the course of your treatment of these patients, was your support for SSI payments, was that ever based on false material or false statements?
Looking back, the clients, and this is where I have a lot of remorse for what I did, there were clients who I would test, try to test with instruments like the Bender Gestalt, more paper and pencil instruments, so I could get some data that I could argue for. And many of these clients would not respond or did not know how to respond to these instruments that I would then use to argue or support a potential disabling condition. And it got frustrating, and then there were yes, there were points where I did say in the documents that, that they had not performed, and yes, I was not forthright, honest about that, and I regret that.
Okay. So in lay terms, you lied about the results of a psychological exam?
In lay terms, yes.
Okay. How often did you do that?
Well, number one, I never saw the complete paperwork or investigation from the federal government because we ended up reaching a plea deal. So there's a date mentioned of 2005. I believe that my case, from my point of view, focused more like between 2011 and 2012. I don't understand what they meant by a case in 2005, and they never showed me that case, and they never showed my attorney that case. And my attorney did bring that up with the prosecutor, but that was something that was eventually, there was no discussion about that because eventually I decided to, with the attorneys, my attorney's assistants, to just go ahead and plea. Which, I mean, I was guilty, and so yes, I mean, I pled guilty because I was guilty, but the case is, from the time point of view, the timeline point of view, had more to do with between 2011 and 2012, which is when the Middle Eastern clients had come in.
So can you provide an estimation of how many clients you did this service for?
Well, I don't agree with the number that's cited, but I believe that the charge said that it was like below 90 or 90 and below. I don't have those documents in front of me, but it was not in the hundreds and hundreds.
And that was specifically as to the Social Security disability forms, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, with respect to the INS forms, can you describe what happened with those forms?
Well, I still don't completely, I mean, I would fill out mainly forms for elderly individuals, folks that were primarily not English speaking, and these were folks that were eligible. These were my clients who were eligible to apply for citizenship. For something like that, you're not necessarily required to do any kind of psychological testing or administration of instruments. You're asked, do you believe that this individual is capable of taking the citizenship exam in English or in another language that's available? I don't recall exactly the number of cases that the government says that I fraudulently, signed off on, but I believe that in my estimation, it had to have been a handful.
Okay. And over what time period, if you can recall?
2011, 2012.
Okay. And what was your reasoning for completing the fraudulent SSDI documents? Why did you do it?
As I've mentioned in my documentation to the board, I allowed my politics to get in the way at that moment in time. I've always, I think, been very, very clear about my politics as a psychologist and as a university professor and researcher. And I allowed that to cross the line when it came to making these decisions. I have a lot of remorse for that. I have a lot of shame and embarrassment for that. I should not have allowed that to happen.
And what do you mean by your politics got in the way? Can you describe what that means?
My politics were of anti-war. My politics were of seeing people who I do not believe in that war. And I saw people that were maimed, people that were hurt, people that were divided, refugees. By nature, I'm a pacifist.
And because of what you saw with these patients, you wanted to help them, is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Did you consider the downstream consequences that the patients would suffer if your wrongdoing was brought to light?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what in your mind, what was those consequences?
Well, my hope was that these individuals over time would be able to have some opportunities to work, to be employed, to get involved in other kinds of social service programs within their communities that would help them, those that were employable, be able to eventually gain some kind of work.
I worded that question poorly. Did you consider negative consequences that your clients could suffer if your wrongdoing was brought to light? Did that cross your mind?
No.
Okay. Looking back on it now, can you articulate any negative consequences that a client in that situation could suffer?
Well, I would imagine, looking back now, that their benefits would be cut off if, in fact, they were found to not meet the criteria for disability.
You didn't consider the fact that the clients themselves could potentially face criminal charges?
No, I did. I mean, I have thought about that in reflection. I've thought a lot about that in reflection.
And what about potential deportation proceedings?
Looking back, yes.
Now, I want to talk about the translator, the woman that would bring clients to you. How many patients did she bring to you?
I do not recall.
Okay. Over what period of time did this person bring patients to you?
I would say over a 2-year period.
Okay. Would you have conversations with this translator?
I want to make it very clear that the only conversations I had with this translator were in my office, were when she brought the clients, when she would come in and sometimes translate. Other than that, I had no conversations outside of my office with her. I never met with this person outside of my office. I never would say met, you know, in a dark smoke-filled room in the middle of the night to plan something out. I never did anything like that.
When you would speak with the translator in your office, would the translator either tell you what the patient needed, or would she give you any direction with respect to the creation of the documents?
No.
Okay. That was something that you took upon yourself to do?
Based on what I saw.
Okay.
Or what I thought that clients were expressing to the translator.
Okay. And you received fees for creating these false documents, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and that was $200 per document?
It ranged anywhere from nothing to $200.
Okay. And at this point in your life, you were having financial issues, is that correct?
Yes, I was.
You had, I believe you stated, approximately $5,000 a month family support obligation, is that right?
Yes, I had child support in the amount of almost $5,000 a month.
I believe that you also stated that you owed the IRS monies for back taxes, is that right?
That was correct, because I was working on 1099s, and I was then using that money to pay child support, so yes.
Okay. When you were arrested, isn't it true that you told the agents that you used most of the money? Let me rephrase this. You told the agents that you gave a portion of the money to your secretaries, is that right?
Yes, because they were underpaid, and they would work an extra hour or two sometimes, and so yeah, and it was actually one secretary.
Okay. And used the rest for your living expenses, is that right?
Yeah, but yes.
Okay. Did you ever tell your secretary the source of these funds?
Yes, I mean, the secretary knew this translator.
Did you and the secretary ever have conversations about the translator?
Not really.
Did you and the secretary ever have conversations about the patients brought to you by the translator?
Not really.
Okay. Is that no?
No.
Okay. You were arrested and then charged federally, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know if anyone else involved in this situation was also charged?
No.
You don't know, okay.
I did work with the feds immediately to make a phone call, and they did raid this translator's office in the kind of El Cajon area of San Diego, but I do not know what happened to this person's case. I don't know anything about that.
So was it the FBI?
I was working with agents from Social Security, and I don't know who else was involved, but immediately I worked with the government within a day or two after my arrest, and one of the things that they had me do was to make phone calls to this individual to find out if she was at her residence or at her office. And I remember one time they did call, and they did go to her office, raid her office. I was told by the agents, but I knew nothing else.
So when you made these phone calls, the agents were in the room with you?
No, we were in a parking lot.
Parking lot, okay.
And there was several cars that were, full of officers that were waiting to go make a raid.
And when you had the telephone conversations with the translator, was there any discussion of transferring patients or seeing patients?
You mean when I worked for the feds?
Yeah, when you did that,
No.
the phone call, okay. The phone call was strictly, are you home, are you not home?
Yes, and I need to talk to you. They gave me a script to read.
Okay. Did that script include any facts related to SSDI documents or INS documents?
I don't recall that specifically.
Okay. Sorry. You stated that you recall one individual who came to your office specifically asking for fraudulent documents, is that right?
Looking back, yes, I recall that.
And that was the agent who conducted the undercover operation, is that right?
That is what I was told by my attorney.
Okay. And you said you never read any transcript or any other material regarding that undercover operation?
No.
Okay. In applying for this petition, did you ever review any information regarding that undercover operation?
No.
Okay. Is it your opinion that your interaction with that undercover agent, was that different than the interactions that you had with other patients that you completed forms for?
Yes.
And how was that different?
Well, the individual kept calling and calling my secretary, and then eventually my secretary made an appointment with this individual, and he showed up and he was very persistent about wanting an evaluation done.
And he was persistent in his personal conversation with you in your
Yes.
office?
Yes.
Okay. Can you recall what this individual stated?
No, other than that he wanted an SSI evaluation, but no, I don't exactly recall now.
Did you feel pressured by this individual to comply with his wishes?
I felt surprised.
Do you believe that you were you an equal participant in the conversation about the documents?
I do not recall.
Okay. Do you believe that you were more reactive rather than taking a active part in the creation of the documents for that undercover officer?
I do not recall.
Okay. If I can have one moment, Your Honor. Now, with respect to the patients that you saw and treated and created the false documents for, do you believe that you played an active role in the creation of those documents?
Can you ask that question again?
Well, with the patients that you saw and treated and created fraudulent documents for those patients, were you the one driving that forward, or did you acquiesce to a request, a patient request?
No, that was me doing treatment notes on clients.
Okay. Do you believe that you were justified in creating the fraudulent documents for your clients?
No.
Okay. Do you agree that you benefited financially from this operation?
Yes.
While you were engaging in this activity, did you have any inkling that it was illegal?
Well, I knew that it was not right.
And did you weigh that feeling of knowing that what you were doing wasn't right with
Yes, that's.
Let me finish the question. With your personal politics, did you weigh those two?
I did, and that's why I stopped. And the week after, the week after my arrest, I was offered a job to be a dean because I was going to leave that practice. And for many reasons, but I was given the opportunity to become a dean of the Chicago School of Psychology in Los Angeles. So I was going to leave that because I weighed that, and I also weighed other circumstances that were occurring in my life. But yes, and I had to turn that job down, rightfully so.
You turned the job down after you were arrested?
Of course.
Okay. After you were arrested, but before you were criminally charged, you were released on essentially house arrest, is that correct?
I'm not sure that it was called house arrest, but I mean, I was released. I went to the federal facility in downtown San Diego for 3 days. I was released on bail. My family took care of the bail.
Oh,
and,
you got bailed out.
And yeah, that was it.
During that time between your release and your entry of a guilty plea, you had to meet with individuals from the federal court or federal probation?
That's correct.
Okay. And during that time, you tested positive for cocaine, is that correct?
That's correct.
And can you explain why during that time did you decide to use cocaine?
Well, I first of all, for a year, I had to wait for sentencing, almost a year. I could do nothing for a year after this arrest. I did pray to God that I die. I was never suicidal. I could do nothing except stay at home. And at that point, important people in my life, many had left me, including my children. They were not talking to me. I was essentially a pariah in San Diego. I couldn't leave San Diego. The sentence, he kept dragging and dragging and dragging over time for many reasons. But it was not something that I did regularly. I believe I tested positive 2 or 3 times, and but it's not something that I fell back on. I was very, very depressed at that time.
How many times during that time period did you use cocaine?
The only times that I tested positive.
Okay. So the 2 or 3 times, those were 2 or 3 separate instances of use?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I also did go into treatment for that. In fact, the federal probation officer put me into treatment at, I don't recall the name of the program, but I went into treatment for that.
Now, in applying for your petition, you discussed your rehabilitation. Specifically, I believe you stated that one of the insights that you've gained from this experience is that you should not have worked in isolation. Do you remember including that in your narrative?
That's true.
Okay. And how was working in isolation, how did that lead you to engaging in the criminal behavior?
Well, one of the key issues for psychologists, there's been a lot written on this in the literature, and there's been workshops on never, I'm sorry, let me take that back, of always seeking consultation to help you make appropriate decisions, ethical, professional decisions. One of the things that happens when you're in isolation is that you don't have that opportunity to get feedback and even supervision. And that is clearly something that happened in my case. Even though I did work with other colleagues, the psychiatrists were too busy, and they were in their own kind of part of the practice. And there was another psychologist there, but she was getting her hours, and we had no relationship. So when I say that I was working on my own, I was truly working on my own. And I was seeing patients that for the most part were severely impaired. And what I mean by that, the majority of my patients had major depression, schizophrenia. I would oftentimes see anywhere from 10 to 12 patients a day, which is a lot. And I know that again, looking back, that was not the right thing to do. And again, when you're in isolation, as I was, looking back, I should have sought supervision. I should have, from colleagues, that I value. I did not do that. But I've learned a lesson, and I would not do that again. I would not work with that kind of a population, again, for these reasons.
And I'm sorry, what kind of population would you not work with?
I would not work with a severely impaired population in a private practice setting where I would be by myself and not be able to have support from colleagues or be able to go to colleagues that I could get support from.
And I'm sorry if I'm belaboring the issue. I don't understand how, I don't see how you get, explain to me how the population and working by yourself led to the criminal conduct. Maybe I'm seeing that there's a connection there. Maybe I'm misinterpreting what you're saying. So can you explain that for me? I simply just don't understand.
Can I talk to my attorney about this?
Generally, if you want to go off the record, I suppose. It was a clarification I asked.
Well, my question is that my sense is that you're linking my criminal offense to working. What you're saying is that how did my criminal offense due to working exclusively on my own or in isolation? And what I'm saying to you is that it contributed to having this legal problem. So I don't understand your question.
So I'm asking you, how did it contribute? I still don't understand that. So if you can explain that, I'd appreciate it. If not, if it's an opinion, then that's the answer. Do you understand?
No, I don't. Because if you're looking for a straight cause and effect, I'm not sure that I could answer that question. And that I think my isolation contributed. I was overwhelmed. I saw too many patients. I had financial responsibilities. It was a multitude of issues that collectively led me to this legal problem, this legal, that cost me my license. But if you're looking for a straight one-to-one cause and effect, I can't give you that answer.
Okay. So I think what you're saying is the isolation, the type of population, the lack of consultation, all of those things created the perfect storm for this incident to happen. Is that fair to say?
I would say that the isolation would be a part of it, the divorce, the stress and the financial that I was going through at the time, the depression, because I've had a history of depression, and also anxiety, which I've had a history of over time. but was seeking treatment for it. So it wasn't like for anxiety and depression, but collectively, I would say that all those factors would lead maybe towards making these, well, led me towards making this bad decision. That I have no doubt about.
Okay.
That I have no doubt about. I'm very clear about that.
I think I understand. Thank you. You also discussed assurances regarding recidivism, or assuring lack of recidivism. Specifically, you said that you would not see patients who needed SSI or citizenship-related papers. Is that correct?
If I'm granted my license, I'm very clear also in the court, in the court documents regarding my conviction, it's very clear that it says there that I will not work with individuals who ask me, who ask me to fill out SSI documents, or who ask me to fill out citizenship documents. Somewhere I know that somewhere in the court papers related to my case, it says that I will not work in that kind of a clinical situation. Or, or as my attorney told me, that was representing me, is that if you ever confront that, if you ever get your license back and confront that, and I agree, by the way, you will refer those persons out, and that's exactly what I will do. I will not sign off on any paperwork that has to do with citizenship or SSI ever again.
So you would agree to not take on those type of patients?
Well, in the settings that I'm planning on working in, that may not even be, that question may be moot. Okay. I'd like to work more, like, for example, like in an academic setting. I don't rule out going back and doing some teaching and maybe doing supervision of young students who are wanting to go into the field. And so that would not necessarily be an issue.
So is that a yes, that you would rule out those patients?
I would do everything I could to rule out those patients in any setting that I would be in. Currently, I am working in a setting where there are people who are on SSI. I'm a case manager at a residential treatment program, and I was asked as recently as yesterday if I would, help someone sign off on their SSI disability, and I said no.
How would you handle this situation? Let's say your license is restored, you're treating a patient in a private practice for a period of time, and after 6 months or a year of treatment, they ask you to complete either an SSI document or a INS document. How would you handle that?
Well, I believe that I would handle that initially through the consent process, and also through the initial process of letting the client know what limitations are regarding my practice. So they would know.
Now, do you believe that you, regarding your incarceration, do you believe that that was unjust?
No.
Do you believe that you were unfairly imprisoned?
I don't understand your question.
Do you believe that the prison sentence that you received was appropriate?
I'm not sure that I mean, the judge made that decision, and I'm sorry, that decision was made between the prosecutor and my attorney. I agree to that sentence. I mean, I feel that it was, I mean, it was punishment. Being behind bars, is the most awful thing one can experience in life.
have the opportunity, you cannot pass notes to the witness while he's answering a question. You will have the opportunity to ask him questions after he's finished his testimony from Mr. Bill, but right now, he is, you know, unless there is a break in the questioning and you ask to speak with him, the notes have to stop. They've been going on for a while and I've let it go, but at this point, you need to stop.
Okay, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Bill?
From your perspective, based on your view of the underlying case, do you believe that the time that you served in prison was excessive compared to what you believe you did?
No, but that decision was based on many, many factors, including the pre-sentencing exam. The federal government gives you points and looks, makes a long, drawn-out study of your life and looks at all the good things that you've also done in your life, looks at your past history, criminal history, looks at a lot of factors, your level of education, the work that you have done, what you have contributed to your community, what you've done in your life. And so the recommendations that were made through the pre-sentencing officer then is something that took a big role in the ultimate sentence that was given to me. So I agreed with that sentence.
Okay. When you were released from custody, did you receive psychological treatment?
Yes, I received psychiatric treatment.
Psychiatric treatment. And do tell your provider that you believe that the prison sentence was unfair?
No.
You didn't say that, okay.
No.
Did you tell your provider that if you had hired a private attorney rather than retaining the services of the public defender, your case would have been different?
I remember my provider asking me if I had been involved, if I had had like a public or private, and I said I had had a public defender because I had lost everything, and then I remember her making a comment about it may have been different with a private attorney, and I remember chuckling about it and saying maybe it could have, but the case had already been litigated, and I was now working on finishing my probation and moving on with my life.
Okay. Regarding the underlying facts of the alleged criminal conduct, is it fair to say that you still dispute the federal government's allegations?
No.
Okay. Do you dispute the number of patients that were involved?
Well, you know, sir, I don't spend a lot of time looking back at my life. I spend more time looking forward in my life. I am, again, very shamed. I have a lot of embarrassment and shame for what I did. I pled guilty because I was guilty. I don't spend a lot of time reflecting back on the case. The incarceration was traumatic. The first 3 days that I went into that I was arrested had been the first time in my life. If it wasn't for a psychologist who put me into a psychiatric holding unit because I was scared, and God bless that psychologist in San Diego at the Metropolitan Facility. She happened to be there on Friday night, the day that I arrested. She evaluated me and spoke to me and put me in a psychiatric holding facility for 3 days. The incarceration was traumatic for me. When I went to Mendota, even though it was a satellite camp, It wasn't, you know, behind bars, but nonetheless, I wasn't. The threats that I experienced along the way, you know, when I was arrested initially, and then when I went to the facility. And what I mean by that is being asked about whether I was a gang member or not, things like that, that I had never been ever involved in my life. For those reasons, I don't dwell a lot. I understand and I take responsibility for what I did, but I cannot dwell on those aspects at this point in my life. I am here because I am remorseful, and I've worked very hard to rehabilitate, and I'm not going to stop for the rest of my life. I've brought a lot of shame and embarrassment to the profession, to my family, to myself, but I know that I still have a lot of good in me, and I believe that I can still offer a lot to professionals of all ages and of different training levels. But for me, sir, to be, with all due respect, to be reflecting on that, I don't know what good that can do to me at this point, because I've been working really hard for the last, 4 years now to join a profession that I love, and I've made a mistake.
Sentenced to 21 months in prison, is that right?
Yes.
And you served, was it 18 months?
Yes.
Okay. And you served about, was it 2 years on probation?
Yes.
And the probation terminated successfully in December 2016, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall when you applied with the board for this petition?
I don't recall the date specifically.
Do you recall the month?
I don't recall it specifically. At this moment, I don't recall it.
That's fine. And then one last question. When you did an interview with a member of the board in 2017, is that correct?
Of what board?
This board. Isn't it true that you submitted to an interview?
I met, not a member of the board, I met with an investigator from the Consumer Service or Bureau of Consumer Affairs or something.
Okay. So when you met with that investigator, you told her that, and I'm quoting you here, that you used bad judgment, and at the time, you didn't recognize what was really going on regarding the underlying criminal facts. Can you explain what you meant by you didn't really understand what was going on?
First of all, it was a male investigator. And secondly, what I meant by that was at the time of the arrest, because I was arrested at gunpoint in my office, that's what I meant.
One moment, Your Honor. Nothing else, Your Honor.
Thank you. At this point, Mr. Frankel, do you have any questions for your witness?
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Do you have any questions for Dr. Velasquez?
I have a question for my client.
Yes, well, that's
Yes.
Dr. Velasquez, yes.
Can you tell the board what you've been doing for the past 4 to 5 years in some encapsulated way?
Well, when I end up going to the federal satellite camp, Mendota, I immediately became a teacher and taught Spanish, and also helped a lot of the inmates, many who had learning disabilities, and so I taught courses to them on basic social learning skills. I was also a tutor, and I worked for a library there. While I was there, I applied for a paralegal program, and I completed that program a month after I got out of there. I applied to New Mexico State University, the criminal justice program, and was accepted while I was there at Mendota, and delayed my entry for about a year, and then went into the criminal justice program. It's online, although I have gone out and visited the university and spoken and met with my professors. I worked as a paralegal for 2 years for a former district attorney, Kathleen Alvarado, who's now in private practice in Riverside, California, doing family law. Last year, I began to work as a case manager at an adolescent group homes in Riverside, Moreno, and I did that up until about January on a part-time basis. And then the beginning of March, I was hired as a case manager for Cedar House, inpatient residential facility for folks, men and women. It has 120 beds in it, men and women who have substance abuse addictions. The clients that I've been assigned have co-occurring disorders, both mental illness as well as substance abuse problems. I love my work there. As a case manager, I have to help them with all aspects of their programming there and also help them transition out. It's a program that caters to primarily low-income, low SES individuals, folks who have been homeless, folks who have been in the prison system, folks who have been on the margins of society. I love that program. It keeps me very, very busy. And so I've now been there. This is, I guess, the beginning of my 3rd month there. And I see myself working there for an extended period. I have 12 to 14 individuals on my caseload at any given time. And I'm able to use my English and Spanish language skills there. I don't do therapy. That's not my job. I do case management. I work with a therapist there in terms of helping make treatment decisions. So that's what I'm doing now. In addition to that, I've done many presentations throughout the country since I got out on especially the children of the incarcerated. One of the most heartbreaking things that I saw were the children that would be brought to visit their parents. It was heartbreaking. And one of the things that I said to myself was that once I got out, if I could, I would continue to do research and do writing in the area. So as a result of this experience, and one reason why I went into the criminal justice field now in the master's program is that I want to be able to work with the children of the incarcerated. There's a lot of children out there, obviously. The numbers are increasing. And so I've developed a specialty in that area, and I've written some book chapters, as you've seen in the materials that I've presented. I've also done presentations at Head Start, where I talk about these kinds of issues. I've done presentations, the MOS program at Fullerton College for the last couple of years. These are young men, mainly African American and Latino, who are at risk for dropping out of school, going into the criminal justice system. I share with them my experiences. I'm very honest with them. I think I've been able to make an impact on that. I've also had papers accepted to the American Psychological Association for presentation. I'm currently right now, my thesis focuses on the MMPI. Prior to this problem in my life, I was recognized as the expert on the MMPI test with minorities, especially with Latinos. My thesis right now is on the MMPI and the relationship between acculturation and ethnic identity and MMPI performance of Latinos and non-Latinos who are in a criminal justice program. That's what my data collection is on right now. I plan to write a book in the future on the MMPI. I wrote a book, I edited a book in 2004, The Handbook of Chicano and Chicana Psychology, and I want to, the publisher has approached me about revising the book, and I want to do that. Obviously, I want to be able to include chapters that deal with the criminal justice system and how Chicanos and Chicanas and Latinas are entering the system and how that's impacting communities, children, and families. I still have a lot of dreams. I've been approached about possibly applying for a faculty position at New Mexico State in the future in criminal justice. There's an open right now, but my own professors have asked me to think about maybe doing something like that. I know that I wouldn't require necessarily a license, but that doesn't mean that I couldn't work across campus, say with students who are in the counseling program who want to go into correctional kind of counseling. I know I could offer a lot from my own personal experiences. I have my two children are my son just graduated from San Diego State in psychology in December. My daughter's at University of Massachusetts, Boston. She's doing her degree in psychology, finishing in December of this year. I'm very proud of them. They mean a lot to me in my life. I'm blessed that my mom is still here. She's going to be 90, and she didn't know about what happened because that would have been something that probably would have impacted her very negatively. So that was, I think, an okay family secret that we've kept. But the good news, though, is that she's around and she's in my life. I feel very blessed. My life has been good. I regret tremendously having made this mistake. I think that that all that I've done thousands, hundreds of hours, not thousands, of continuing education. As a way, you all, and to show the profession that that I want to keep up to date. I've not stopped doing that from the day I came out. I'll never forget it. I was at a halfway house in Rubidoux, California, and as soon as I was allowed to go to the county library down the street, I immediately enrolled in continuing classes, continuing ed, online, and have been accumulating those ever since, with the dream and the hope of someday coming before you, and and offering my case to you. I believe I'm a good therapist. I believe that from this experience. I think all of these collective experiences, educational, work-related. I have a very good relationship right now. I mean, I have a very healthy relationship right now with the person who's here in the room. She just recently became this as well, and I'm very proud of her. I think I've done a lot to rehabilitate myself. I'm not going to stop that. And I continue to also see my psychiatrist. Anxiety and depression in my life, but it's been something that I've gotten a hold of, and I feel very good about that. I have no problem in sharing any of aspects of my experience with young people, and I do. I continue to mentor young people in a graduate school. I have a student graduating from San Diego State's master's program in this month. I have another student of mine, Carla, who will be wrapping up her PhD at Washington State. I've mentored a lot of students over the years into master's and doctoral programs, and I want to keep doing that. I'm going to stop there because I know you'll have to probably do lunch, but
No,
I want to just tell you.
The board needs to ask questions.
Okay, but that's what I've done. I've done a lot to rehabilitate myself.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Should the board decide to reinstate your license?
Oh, well, we can wait to that question until after the board. Why don't you hold that question and let the board have questions? So, okay, why don't we start with Dr. Kasuga at this point?
Hi, Dr. Velasquez.
Hi.
Would you say that advocacy is part of the work of psychologists?
It can be, but you have to be very clear about how far you can go with that. And that's one thing that I've learned in this, is that it's hard sometimes not to be an advocate, especially if you're working with low-income, marginalized populations or those that don't have resources. But you have to draw the line somewhere, and that's something that I've now, obviously this has been quite a lesson that's made that, but advocacy is important. I mean, but you have to draw the line.
What do you mean when you say draw the line? Like, how are you?
Well, you have to watch your politics. That the advocacy is strictly driven by your client and not by how you view the world and your experiences growing up. I'm a child of the 60s, and that has colored my world tremendously.
So what are you currently doing to keep your political views in check so it doesn't affect your...
I go to work every day, and that's the last thing that I do is deal. People want to talk about politics. I just don't talk about that, just like I don't talk about religion.
How about if like if you're granted your license and you're working as a psychotherapist, what are some of the things that you will do to keep your political check or to make sure that, as you mentioned, to draw the line in terms of your like advocacy?
Well, I mean, one thing obviously would be that if I do feel that I'm getting near that I'm going to immediately seek consultation and support from other colleagues. One thing that I've actually never done is brought up political discussions in therapy per se. I mean, I've never actually said, well, you know, let's talk about your political beliefs and how that impacts your mental health status. I've never done that, and I would never do that. But a lot of it, I think, would just be keeping it outside of the client therapist relationship.
I guess one of my questions is your patients, former patients that you worked with that were harmed by your actions. If you could do it all over again, how would you have advocated for those patients as a therapist?
You do it all over again. What I probably would have done is not see those patients and maybe refer them to someone who knew the language and knew the experience of what it's like to be in a war zone and to be a refugee. One who is from that particular cultural group. That's for sure something that it was you know, a terrible mistake to depend on a translator, because we know in the field that, you know, in translation so much can get lost or distorted in therapy. So I would never. So I think to me probably the best advocacy would be to send them or refer them out to services that are much more culturally and linguistically appropriate for them.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Mr. Fu?
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Since your incarceration, have you been asked to falsify any documents?
No.
And one of the things you mentioned are the stressors of working with the population that you were working with previously. Do you feel like that working with incarcerated children is a stressor for you?
With incarcerated children?
Yes, I think.
Or no. I'm talking about wanting to work with the children of the incarcerated. Would it be a stressor for me? No, because I learned a lot about how, unfortunately, who are incarcerated, how they try to do parenting from behind bars, and it's not. I mean, there's a lot of problems with that, and And I saw that firsthand oftentimes, you know, and so that's something that, no, it would not, it would give me a different, I guess, maybe a more inside-oriented perspective, but it wouldn't bring up any issues for me. It wouldn't be traumatic. It wouldn't be, I think it would be helpful.
And what inspired your teaching while you were at the satellite campus? What inspired your teaching while you were at the satellite campus?
As soon as I got there, I said to myself, okay, I've got X number of months here, which I thought were going to be 18 months. And as soon as I got there, I said, okay, Roberto, okay, what do you have to do to survive this experience? And back on what I've always done best, which for me, I've always loved teaching. I taught at San Diego State for 21 years, and I've always loved it. And so that's exactly what I fell back on. And I looked around and I said, okay, what kinds of folks can I help? And what was heartbreaking were a lot of folks who are there don't know how to read or write, they're illiterate, and many are have learning disabilities that perhaps maybe have not been detected. And so I went to, and the whole time that I was there, I did that. I was also involved with AA, and I was also involved in other support groups, and also in following my faith while I was there. But getting back to your question, what inspired me was that I had something they didn't have, and that is education. And 99% of the people that were there didn't have, well, obviously the level of education that I had, and I'm not better than them, by the way, but most of them didn't even have a high school education. And I could see how education, because I grew up in a tough community where a lot of my friends didn't get education and ended up in the prison system. And so that's what inspired me. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see people. As fortunate as I am, I thank God that I'm very fortunate. And it was my education that rescued me and saved me while I was there.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Can we just go off the record for a second? Is there an issue? Is there an issue that needs to be? No. Okay, we're back on the record. Dr. Horn?
Thank you. Dr. Velasquez, I just have a couple of questions for you. So when you got in this trouble, how long had you been practicing, like in a therapeutic or applied setting?
In 2012, I had already completed 20 years of my licensure. Okay. I was licensed right around 1992.
Okay. I mean, it's clear to me just in hearing you, how you're talking about things that you're great compassion and a lot of heart. And you talk about not working with these kinds of people before, not doing SSI or SSDI evaluations or evaluations for citizenship. But beyond, I mean, you also said that you wouldn't work with someone that you didn't have facility with the language because that was essentially outside your area of competence. But what about other people, not these folks, but who have, during the 20 years, you saw people who had heart-wrenching stories. But this was really a time when what you did was, to my mind, was stepped out of appropriate boundaries.
Yes, yes.
And had you do it this time versus, surely you've heard difficult stories before. There have been difficult times before.
Well, I feel confident enough to be able to work with folks who do have other stories and other narratives and other experiences. Again, I look back at that time in my life, and I look back at all that was going on, and you're absolutely right, I did step out of my job and my role. There's a specific methodology for avoiding this. Other than the fear of not losing my license again and the fear of, I would never want to go to prison again. Not a specific, again, method comes to mind at the moment, but yes, I have worked in 20 years with people with a lot of pain. I don't think it would overwhelm me to clients with a lot of pain. Like I said, I'm not really too keen on ever wanting to go back and do a private or a practice kind of a situation, which is where I was. Where I work now, based program, I have a lot of colleagues who I can fall back on and get consultation from, and I do. You know, clearly now it's more related to case management and assisting folks, but I do believe that I could serve people with again, mild to moderate to severe problems and issues. You know, in some ways, I failed myself also because I've often argued in my classes and in my research about how people who are bilingual display issues differently in English and in Spanish. I'm talking about English-Spanish here. That they don't, that there's idioms of distress that are very different in both languages and behaviors and symptoms that are very different. And I should have paid attention to myself because that's exactly what I was talking about, what happened. And I should not have done that. Yeah. And I'm not a victim. I want to be very clear about this. I am not a victim. And I have never felt like a victim. I did what I did, and I'm very sorry for that.
So I think I'm asking you, how will you pay attention to yourself now? What's different?
Well, now is the maturity and the growth that has happened since then. I'm not going to overwork myself because I was doing that. At that time, I was having to, I ended up paying 10 years worth of child support, which was a lot of money, and by that, I don't have that stressor anymore in my life. My life is very simple now compared to how it was back then. I was juggling at one time both an academic position as well as a part-time private practice, all to try to support a family. I would not live that life. I do not desire that lifestyle. So I know that something like that will keep me in check.
Okay. Let me see. Sorry. You said that you've learned a lot from this experience. Could you kind of summarize what you've learned from this experience?
Of course. First and foremost, keep politics out of the therapy office. Stay very focused on the cultural linguistic issues, and if I cannot manage them, then refer out clients to someone who can work with them. In general, if there are clients with other issues that I can then also help them find someone who can help them. Continue, you know, and if need be, go into therapy, traditional therapy. Right now, I continue to consult with my psychiatrist, and she's been very, very good at working with me. But if need be, I have a problem with going back into therapy if issues start coming up for me. So I've learned that. And of course, I've learned the lesson of I do not want to break the law in any form or fashion. I do not want to do anything like that. So, I mean, those are the things that I've learned. I've also learned about, you know, the people who care for you and who stick with you through thick and thin. And how it's important to nurture those relationships. And I've been very, very lucky. I have a very good, healthy circle of friends that I can fall back on. And again, I don't want to leave the profession. I value it tremendously. It's been my whole life.
Okay.
Ms. Jones?
Good afternoon, Dr. Velasquez.
Good afternoon.
So I had a couple of questions, which I think got answered in a few other colleagues ahead of me, but you learned about you didn't want to be involved with anything illegal. The one thing I was struck when you were being questioned by the DAG, and the question was asked, did you know it was illegal? Your response was, I knew it wasn't right. Did you feel like it was illegal? Because I feel like, I guess that really struck me when you said it that way.
Yeah, looking back, yes. I mean, yeah. Yes.
And I guess the other kind of question I had, because I know you said about politics putting it inside and being in check, but something else as you were talking about the negative consequences to patients served, it made me also think about the issue of power. And then I looked at your expansive resume, and you've served in a lot of academic settings where you've been the leader. How will you, moving forward, manage that as an issue of crossing a boundary, or in how you execute the work that you do in managing power?
One of the other lessons that I've learned, I've always tried to be a humble person. That's always, but at 61 years of age, I know that I'm very different from what I was when I was 30 or 40 years of age. And, you know, you get all the attention when you're a professor, and of course you have an answer. I mean, that's all part of being in that world, but I don't feel like I have, I've outgrown all of that. You know, I just want to contribute as much as I can with the folks that I'm going to day basis. I don't I don't think about power. I don't in terms of using power. I'm aware that I can have power, the role that I have as a case manager. But I've learned that I'm no different than anybody else. And that was another lesson that I learned from the incarceration experience, that I am no different than anybody else. And that people who abuse power, you know, obviously I don't want to do that. It's never been my nature to be abusive of people. I've made mistakes, but deep down inside, those are not the values that I grew up with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Phillips?
There it's on. Okay. Hi, Dr. Velasquez.
Hi.
You said you made a mistake. Would you like to amend that statement?
Well, within the mistake, I would say that I made many mistakes within that mistake. In trouble with the law, absolutely.
You said that you did at least 90 reports that were false. Is that correct?
Well, I would say that there were 90 reports for which many didn't have the complete testing results, or the results were falsified, yeah. But not all of them, I don't believe all of them were, but that's what the government says.
But there were instances where you exaggerated people's diagnoses, correct? You overdiagnosed them.
I would say that, yes.
And there were cases where you fabricated or administered tests.
That's correct.
And you falsely recommended people for Social Security disability without having the data to support it.
That's correct.
Okay. And that happened on at least 90 occasions.
That's what I believe, and that's what I think the government in the end said.
Okay. So you said that you won't do it anymore, and you won't do SSDI work anymore, correct?
Correct.
Are there other ways that psychologists can commit fraud?
Well, there are many ways that psychologists could commit fraud. Insurance fraud, billing fraud, false notes or notes. Yeah, there are many ways.
When you were with pretrial services, they asked you to do some therapy, and you did therapy for, I
I
think,
did.
about a year with
A year, it was almost
Ms. Brown?
52 sessions, yeah.
Okay. Have you done any therapy since then?
No,
Okay. Do you reckon you did on at least 90 occasions was sociopathic? I'm not saying you're a sociopath, but that was sociopathic behavior.
yes.
Okay. And what have you done to address that part of you that could engage in sociopathic behavior?
Well, since coming out of custody, and until recently, I really haven't worked in a mental health field, but in the other fields that I've worked in, I've been into being, accurate and honest in everything that I do, and that's something that I'm doing now. I'm being the thought of falsifying something has not entered my mind. I've not been in that kind of a situation,
I guess what I'm asking is, what evidence do we have that you did internal work, other than your fear of losing your license, to address that part of you that could, on at least 90 occasions, lie to the federal government?
Well, I've not been in therapy, but that doesn't mean that I haven't. Through my continuing ed, I've learned a lot, because a lot of the continuing ed that I've chosen has to do with ethics and has to do with, or relates in some way to the issues that got me into trouble. So I self-study on that. I've also been called out by my colleagues in the profession on what I did, and that has caused me tremendous shame. And I've learned, and so I have reflected on it. It's not that I haven't reflected on it, I have reflected on it. Have I gone into therapy per se? No, but I have on those issues. I'm not ever going to do something like that again. Not just because of the legal aspects, but I have too much integrity. At that point, obviously, I didn't, but where I am now in my life, I have too much integrity. I have too much to lose.
Okay. As part of pretrial services, they also sent you, or I guess it was during sentencing, but it would have been pretrial service office that did it. They sent you to a drug and alcohol program.
That's correct.
And they identified you as potentially having a drug and alcohol abuse problem.
That is correct.
And when you were in that program, they said abuse problem, didn't they?
I believe that there was a diagnosis made.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe you have a drug and alcohol abuse problem?
Today?
Yeah.
No.
Are you sober today?
Am I sober?
Do you abstain from all alcohol and drugs?
From drugs? I mean, I'll have a beer, probably 2 beers every 10 days.
Okay.
But
you said you went to the drug and alcohol program, and afterwards you went to AA.
Well, that was part of AA. I've been involved in AA, and currently where I work at, AA principles in a lot of our programming.
I guess my concern is,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you can hear it in my voice, my concern is that that's been identified as a problem in the past, but we really don't know whether it's still a problem now, other than what you tell us, which I appreciate, I respect. But we are here to protect consumers, so I would that it's not problematic.
And I don't have a problem with either going through any kind of drug testing. Anything like that, I would be more than happy to do. I don't have an issue at all with doing any of that. If the board recommends that, I will do it.
You had 3 positive tests for cocaine. I'm awaiting sentencing, right?
That is correct.
And you said those were the only 3 times you used cocaine during that period.
Yes.
And were you tested every day?
Every week.
Because there was a serial, I think there was like 3 dates fairly bunched closely together.
That I was going through my worst depression. But that's still no excuse, but...
Did you realize you had the first positive test before the second positive test happened?
I don't understand your question.
I guess I'm curious, if you got one positive test,
Hmm?
why you would continue to put yourself in a position to test unless you couldn't stop using the drug?
One of the reasons, looking back, okay, was, again, that I used it at that point was, again, the main reason was because I was depressed and I couldn't work, I couldn't do anything with my life.
You provided us with a reference letter or a character letter from, I guess it's now Dr. Sequoia Kermott?
Yes,
Okay. And she indicated in the letter that you were, had been her undergraduate professor, correct?
that's correct.
And that you had supervised her in a
That's correct.
okay, and that you had helped her on academic presentations that she did,
That's correct.
and sometimes co-authored those with her. And you said in your petition paperwork that you have a girlfriend for the last 3 years named Sequoia.
That's correct.
Is that the same Sequoia?
Yes.
Do you see that as problematic?
No, because I was her undergraduate professor, and I consulted on her dissertation, but I did not write her dissertation. I don't work with her. We live in separate towns.
Her former supervisor, right?
That was a long time ago.
Okay.
That was like 15 years ago,
So you don't
20
see,
years ago.
you don't see it as problematic?
Not at this time.
Okay. The total amount that you agreed to restore to the federal government was how much?
Well, it's not something that I agreed to, it's what the government asked me to do. I believe it's like 1.3, and I've included my restitution payments, a balance here in my...
I actually think it was $1.5 million you'd originally agreed to. You may have paid it down since then, I don't know.
I what?
You may have done, but I think the original amount was $1.5 million.
Right.
Okay. And you agreed to that as part of your plea agreement, saying that's how much you owe the federal government, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Hmm?
Ms. Aquabiti,
Thank you. And thank you, my fellow board members, for asking such good questions. I really appreciate it because these were many of the questions that I was going to ask. However, I do have one question, Dr. Velasquez, and that question is, I just wonder, how long were you working in private practice and teaching at the same time?
Probably maybe like 12 years.
12 years.
Because I'm looking at San Diego State as 21 years, and I didn't really work with clients, even though I was licensed, until probably 6 or 7 years after I was at San Diego State. So probably about 15 years.
So you were working at San Diego State for 15 years?
No, I was probably working there for about 6 years.
Oh, 6 years you were working at San Diego State? And
When I started to see clients, I believe. Mm-hmm.
private practice, okay. And just lastly, the structure of the private practice. When I was reading here, Pacific Health Systems, were there other practitioners or just you by yourself? And I'm just trying to...
I would say probably consortium is a good way to describe it. It was like almost everyone kind of had their own clients. I worked for the business.
You worked for a psychiatrist?
Yeah, but I did a 1099.
And lastly, I said I had one question, but just three. Sorry. Lastly, how did you get your clients? Were they referred or?
Through, I would imagine through Medi-Cal. I mean, I didn't actively advertise ever. I never did anything like that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jackson.
Hello, Dr. Velasquez, pardon me.
Good afternoon.
I have several questions. Maybe one to start with. If you had not been arrested, or how would you know, or when does one know that they've made a mistake? And this is in the context of you were, I believe, gradually more and more fudging and fabricating test data or diagnoses or what goes into the report for the clients you
I was going to leave that practice. I had already made that decision, you know, probably 6 months before. I never gave notice to that practice, but I was going to leave it because I wanted to leave San Diego and I wanted to find a teaching position somewhere else. I wanted to go back into academia. So I was not going to continue in. I was not going to be there for many reasons, and I didn't really want to go and see clients again. Well, at least for a while, you know. I hadn't thought about that.
I think what I'm trying to ask is whether you had some, perhaps I could use the term, I'm not pronouncing it right, but kind of an uneasy awareness that was growing over time that you were doing things that were wrong, that would be a mistake. I don't think you...
Yes.
So you were aware that you were making mistakes and circumstances. We all live in circumstances. Unable to stop those mistakes as you became more aware?
That's very true, and that's why I wanted to leave that practice, and that's why I was going to go back into academia. I didn't want to be in that setting. And aside from that, I was just not happy. I was not happy there. I was not happy with the psychiatrist, with the business, I just was not happy, period. So there were other motivations for me. I was going to leave that setting.
Okay. A little different question. You mentioned that you let your politics become involved, and we've talked and asked some questions about politics, and you've said you'd try not to let that happen again. I think what I hear, perhaps, and I'd like to see if you agree, is that your personal beliefs about what's right and wrong, you clearly are compassionate, that you let those beliefs cloud your judgment about what you were doing. Perhaps you rationalized that it was okay in the service of something greater, helping the underprivileged get better.
I did it specifically, I believe, with the refugees.
Okay.
I didn't let my politics cloud the work I was doing with other clients of other cultural, ethnic, racial groups. That's how I view that whole experience.
And we've also boundaries were missed or lost or crossed or violated.
Correct.
How do you think you would go about, well, we've been asking in various ways how you've learned. Dr. Phillips was asking about the sociopathic quality to the 90-some instances. How would you go about teaching a graduate student or somebody that's advanced in their training to become aware in a better way than you were, perhaps, of how one can make mistakes when they have advocacy, when they really want what's best for the client, and then discovering that you've started to make some mistakes and do things that are wrong. How would you help? It's my way of asking how you help yourself, but I'm wondering how you would help students.
Point, because I actually addressed that issue in one of my presentations with Dr. Stolberg's class at Alliant International in San Diego earlier this year. I talked exactly about that issue. I didn't reference myself as the person, but I talked exactly about it in third person, about, as we were talking about, ethical behavior across politics and culture. And I talked to a group of about 25 doctoral students, and that was one of the issues that I brought up. And that also is I think, something that I want to put into a series of articles and series of presentations again. If definitely something that I would teach my graduate students.
Good. No further, thank you, and no further questions.
Hi, Dr. Velasquez. I also appreciate your heart for the community and for the work that you're doing for low-income communities. Now, is that correct?
Yes, yes, yes.
And you said you're passionate about that. I'm just curious, two things I wanted to ask you. From a billing perspective for Medi-Cal, because a lot of these patients would receive Medi-Cal, are you eligible to bill Medi-Cal because of their conviction?
I am as a KDAC counselor, as a certified alcohol and drug counselor, yeah.
Okay. And then...
But actually, I mean, I have a PIN number, you know, but it's actually the company that does the billing. I don't do billing. The company that I work for.
Oh, I just didn't know if it was strict with who can and cannot bill.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if you had gotten, like, knocked off that list or...
For psychology, I did immediately after the case came down in 2012, yeah.
Okay. And then you said you wanted to go back into academia, is that correct?
Well, that's, I have not stopped dreaming, but that would be something that I would like to do.
And you need your license back? Like, what would you do if you did get your license back early?
If I didn't get my license
No,
back?
if you did.
If I did, well...
Different from what you're doing now.
I would, okay. I would continue working as alcohol counselor because I really enjoy what I do. It brings me a lot of joy to help folks out. So I would continue in that field. I would imagine, I would like to do some supervision of students and teach them my wisdom and all that's accumulated. So I definitely, and teach them, you know, through my mistakes in life. So I would want to do something like that. If I could teach at a university full-time, well, that would be wonderful. We'll see if that ever happens or not, but that's still a dream for me. I would be very careful about the kind of I don't have a dream about, I'd be careful about the kind of clientele that I don't want to work sitting with Medi-Cal or with any kind of SSI kinds of cases. So I probably would limit my practice to a very kind of specific population. Not that my heart still is people and disadvantaged people, but I'd be very careful in terms of the population that I would want to work with at this time in my life. I don't see myself having a full private practice. I see myself maybe consulting, maybe working alongside another psychologist, maybe working with families. I love family therapy, and especially, again, with the children of the incarcerated. Many children are being taken care of in foster care or are being taken care of by their grandparents because their kids, you know, the parents are incarcerated. So that's an area, again, because it's becoming maybe something like that. But I don't see myself working in that setting, nor do I want to ever work in a setting like that again.
Thank you.
Dr. Velasquez, I have one more follow-up question. I appreciate the question that Dr. Erickson asked about your decision to leave. My question would be, as you figure out which populations you would serve, let's suppose you got in a situation where it was a problem. Do you feel comfortable enough to stand up and speak and say that you couldn't do it? Because I felt like what you answered the question to Dr. Erickson, you knew it wasn't like you answered the question that way initially, and you were just waiting to leave to go somewhere else. Do you feel that you now have the tools to say, this is not right, it's illegal, or to figure out a situation? Because if you're serving a population of children, of incarcerated, I would imagine you might face lots of different situations, and how would you be able to protect them as...
Start off with, yes, I would know. And one person who I would turn to would be Mr. Dr. Frankel. Because he's someone that I would immediately go to. We've known each other for a long time. I've always respected his work, and if it was even close to a dilemma or something that looks like a dilemma coming up or an illegality or a problem, he would be someone that I would go to as his role as a psychologist. But there are other people, other colleagues that I would go to as well that I can identify and give you names, and some of those letters of support for me. But yes, I've learned. I think I'm also much more mature now than I was during that time. And like I say, I'm not overwhelmed by the stressors and the problems that I was dealing with at that time in my life. My life, not complex, and I think much more meaningful now than it's ever been. I don't know if I've answered your question, but I think I have the wisdom now and the growth and maturity that I didn't have at that moment in time. Join the profession, which I can't right now. I want to be able to contribute in some form or fashion to the American Psychological Association, which I was a member of and played a very active role in for many, many years on different committees. Maybe work with other psychologists across the country who are with the children of the incarcerated or who are working on special projects. I know that a license isn't necessarily needed for that, but nonetheless, it's something that I think would allow me to go back into the profession, at least the association as well.
Okay, any more questions from the board? Okay, Mr. Bill, do you have any additional questions?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Frankel, do you have any additional questions?
Is this closing or is this further questions? I have no further questions.
Okay, well, with that, then we're going to go to closing if nobody else has any more questions. Okay, Mr. Bill.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is truly an unfortunate case. You have a very accomplished individual who threw everything away by engaging in a series of lengthy series of criminal conduct. Thank you. The underlying facts are unfortunate. They involve a long and repeated history of public trust as well as his license. His post-release rehabilitative efforts are also unfortunate. He's provided thousands of pages of documents to try to rehabilitate himself, but very few speak to the actual underlying offense. Very few speak to why he did it, and none contains an actual full and complete admission of his wrongdoing. The burden is on Dr. Velasquez to prove that he has been rehabilitated, and the burden of proof, the standard of proof, is clear and convincing evidence, which is an incredibly high standard. When considering whether or not the board has several factors to consider, the most important of which I believe are the underlying offense, the petitioner's rehabilitative efforts, the general reputation for truth, and professional ability. Petitioner was disciplined. We heard substantial testimony about what occurred. I don't believe that the testimony presented here today accurately describes what occurred between 2005 and 2011, or 2011 and 2012, depending on who's interpreting it. But I would encourage the board to review AGO 0126 through AGO, I apologize, 102 through AGO 0147. Those are the sentencing memorandum as well as the memorandum of downward departure that was filed by the U.S. Attorney's Office. describe what occurred in the underlying facts. Those documents describe the level of participation that Dr. Velasquez had. Dr. Velasquez today testified that he recalls one undercover officer and being persistent asking for certain documents. Well, when you read the pages that I pointed out, you'll see that Dr. Velasquez took the driving role. He was the one that provided, that told the patient what he was going to do. It wasn't that he was acquiescing to a request. He was actively driving the criminality. So I would strongly consider the board to review those documents. The underlying offense here is incredibly serious. I think everyone in this room has been affected by the crimes that were committed during that period of time. Next, the rehabilitative efforts. The lost rehabilitation requires a consideration of those offenses from which one has allegedly been rehabilitated. And that was held in Pacheco versus the State Bar. And that rehabilitation is a state of mind. In this case, I don't believe that we've heard that Dr. Velasquez faults. Rather, he states that it was his politics or his altruistic beliefs or even his patients were the cause for his behavior. I think that he needs to fully and completely admit that he did this on his own for his own monetary gain. Additionally, the court has also held that while a candid admission of misconduct and full acknowledgement of wrongdoing may be a necessary step in the rehabilitation process, it is only a first step. A truer indication of rehabilitation, the individual demonstrates by sustained conduct over an extended period of time that he is once again fit to practice. And that was the case in Ray Treblecock, Trebilcock, 1981, 30 Cal 3rd, 312. In this case, Dr. Velasquez hasn't given us full and complete admission. And so if he hasn't even taken the first step, I would submit to the board that he hasn't presented any evidence of rehabilitation at this point. Additionally, when considering a petitioner's, the court typically views a person's performance on criminal probation as it's given less weight than when an individual acts without the consequences of engaging in bad behavior. And in this case, that's a case that was in Ray Gossage, 2023 Cal 4th, 1080. In this case, petitioner was arrested in 2000. He was released from custody and terminated successfully from parole in 2016, December 2016. Between his arrest and his release from probation, he was either potential pretrial detainment for violating bail conditions. He was subject to additional criminal penalties by failing to behave accordingly in prison. And he was subject to additional incarceration should his probation. So from 2012 to late 2016, he was under some type of potential criminal penalty if he were to have engaged in bad conduct. So at this point, a year and about 5 months of conduct that Dr. Velasquez has shown since late December 2016 through the present day. And I would submit to you that that period of time is not enough time to grant the reissuance of the license. I think that there needs to be a substantial period of time of good conduct, of rehabilitation shown. And so I think for that, I don't believe that petition for rehabilitation. Now, general reputation for truth. I would submit to you that the petitioner provided inaccurate testimony today when compared with the documents he's provided. I asked him about whether or not he felt he was incarcerated. He stated that he didn't believe so. I asked him if he said that to his treating psychiatrist. He said no. On page AGO 133, quote, he is most upset about having been unfairly imprisoned and having to struggle to regain professional status and credibility. I think when you look at the body of his work, as well as his belief about the underlying crimes, I would submit to you imprisoned. I believe that his statements today regarding the underlying facts and of the case, I believe were not accurate when compared with the evidence that the documentary evidence presented. And so until he's willing to come before us and state that what he did was wrong, and that the allegations against him were in fact true, he hasn't met his burden. And so at this point, I would ask that you deny his petition. There hasn't been sufficient time since the crimes, since the release from prison or the release from probation. He hasn't engaged in the type of rehabilitative efforts that would warrant reinstatement. Today, I don't believe that he has provided truthful statements to the board. And so for all those reasons, I would ask that the court deny his request. Thank you.
Mr. Frankel?
What I would like to say is everything counsel just said, the opposite is true. Dr. Velasquez has admitted, taken responsibility for, owned, processed, treated, how painfully ashamed he has been. He got a first-class introduction to what shame feels like at oh so many levels. He is the kind of guy who is not trying to minimize what he's done. He owns, takes responsibility, and I'm glad you're psychologists. You get a chance to actually spend time with him and listen to him and hear him. And I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Dr. Velasquez, do you have anything further?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. Anybody else before we close the record? Okay, then the record's now closed, and it's 1:26. Thank you.
From the point of view of the board members, how much time would you like to take for lunch? 45 minutes? We're going to have to go procure lunch, even if you bring it back here. So I would say that, why don't we take a 45-minute lunch break and plan on reconvening here at approximately... Oh.
Mr. Frankel, we just have to wait for the court reporter to give you a piece of paper.
I don't know what...
Close it out.
Yeah.
It's the best part of the job.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is now 2:40 in the afternoon on May 10th. We are here in the matter of the petition for early termination of probation filed by Joan K. Dawson. The OAH case number is 2018-010045. My name is Cindy Foreman. I'm an administrative law judge from the Office of Administrative Hearings assigned to sit with the California Board of Psychology, which is convened here today to consider this petition. The date is now May 10th, 2018. Counsel, do you want to please state your name for the record?
Deputy Attorney General Brian Bill on behalf of the people.
Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Bill. It is now 2:40. The hearing was scheduled to start at 1:30, and Ms. Dawson is not present. Mr. Bill, can you just tell the board the efforts that the board has made in contacting the petitioner?
Yes, Your Honor. It's my understanding that the board sent the petitioner a notice of hearing with a proof of service on March 29th, 2018, indicating that the date of hearing was today, the place of the hearing, as well as the time of 1:30. It's my understanding that the notice of hearing was sent by Curtis Gardner, the probation coordinator, seated to my right. It's my further understanding that Curtis Gardner attempted to call the petitioner how many times? Attempted to call the petitioner once today and received no return call.
Okay, is Mr. Gardner here at the hearing?
He is. He's seated to my right.
So, Mr. Gardner, was Mr. Bill's explanation of what occurred correct in your opinion?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. I'll swear you in just, okay. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Well, now that you're sworn in, do you have any difference in opinion with Mr. Bill regarding the service of the notice of hearing on Dr. Dawson?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. And when was the last time you attempted to contact Ms. Dawson?
Dr. Dawson and I have been in constant communication, so probably within the last week or two.
Okay, and did you try and call Dr. Dawson prior to this hearing?
Not prior, Your Honor, but I did call her at 2:15 this afternoon, and then trying to get her to come to the hearing.
And did you receive a response from her call?
No, I did not. I left a voicemail telling her to call me.
Okay, and have you heard back from her?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, so it's now 2:43 in the afternoon, and Dr. Dawson is not here. Mr. Bill, do you have anything to add?
No, Your Honor, other than does the court want me to introduce the notice of hearing and proof of service?
Okay, so why don't we introduce that, and I will mark it as Exhibit 1.
And I would also ask that the court mark as Exhibit 2 the petitioner's license.
Okay. Okay, so I'll mark those as Exhibit 1 and 2, and you can approach. Great. Thank you very much. And I'm going to mark as Exhibit 1 the notice, which has both the declaration of service by certified mail, the certified mail receipt, showing that Dr. Dawson was served at her Sherman Oaks address, along with the record of her license and the fact that, reflecting that her address with the board is the same address that she was served with the meeting notice. Okay, so with that, I'm going to close the record, and the matter has been closed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
Yes, she was.
It's off the record, just curious.
Oh, okay, yeah, she was very motivated.